Good evening. It's 7. You guys all right?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Good evening. We're ready to start our business meeting. We're going to say the pledge and then go into the meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. It's our first session of the year. We had legislative. I feel like, am I on, Jesse? Oh. Okay. It is the first work session of 2025. Welcome. Just a reminder for those of you who don't know, work sessions are open for the public to view. They are not for discussions except for presentation brought on the agenda by the staff to bring forth in front of the board. Legislative sessions, the next one will be next week, are in fact open for public comment. So just wanted to let everyone know that. We don't take attendance, although the trustees are here. So just a couple of announcements. First of all, Martin Luther King celebration. I guess today's the official non-holiday birthday, and I know there were some activities around the community. There are a lot of days of service through the community, which are on multiple websites. I think everyone in the community is invited. Star of Bethlehem is one place I know is having a event at 5 o'clock that is open to the public. And another event that's happening a little bit in a couple weeks is T-Town with their Eagle Fest. T-Town's address actually is Ossining. And they have done a tremendous amount of programs in education, but they have also this year worked a lot with our youth bureau, with the kids. They run a lot of interesting programs, and Eagle Fest is sort of a unique initiative they have. So we encourage folks to go to that. And another friendly reminder that because it's a national holiday on Monday, we hope you enjoy your 3-day weekend, but the village is closed actually for its regular business. So I think we are ready to go. Village manager, I believe. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. So this is a project that goes back many, many years in the village of Ossining, planning for the Route 9 road diet. More conventionally, the narrowing of Route 9 to its pre-urban renewal state for the 1-mile stretch between Cedar Lane and Cedar Place, where it is now 2 lines. It was widened, and really none of the rest of Route 9 was widened continuously as it was originally planned. This has caused an issue where we have a disproportionately high number of vehicular and pedestrian accidents on this road. And for a long time, the board, many boards, including this board, have talked about the potential of narrowing the road. We've worked with the state. We didn't get very far, but we did get, we were awarded a $4 million federal grant to complete the road diet. And it's a process that we were awarded in 2022. And we are now going through the process. The money was transferred from the federal government to the state DOT. We're working with the DOT. And tonight we'll be presenting the plans that will be submitted to be finalized with the DOT. I think it's important to note that we have worked very closely with the police department and our first responders, and we have our police chief, fire chief, OVAC chief, and members. I don't know if Jim is here too from the school district, and Jim Manhattan from the school district, as well as our village engineer, Paul Fraioli. So a lot of work's gone into this, a lot of input from first responders and people who need to get through the village fast. This is a traffic calming project. It is designed to slow traffic. However, it's designed to do so in deference to safety, to make sure that we don't have road accidents, and that we're really committed to a more walkable, bikeable village as part of our overall plan. So while it's difficult to predict in any meaningful way reduction necessarily, by the very fact that we are limiting the crossing of the street from 4 lanes to 2 lanes, that innately will have an effect on pedestrian injuries as well as traffic injuries. And because the traffic's going slower, the likelihood of a very serious or God forbid, fatal accident is mitigated significantly. And our engineers from Creighton Manning are here because they really are the experts. We've been working with them for some time throughout this whole process. We've had board members, Trustee Fritchie and Trustee White have weighed in at certain times on this project. And I would like to now introduce Jared Anderson and Don Adams from Creighton Manning to present what is nearly the final plan, and really an opportunity for the board to be brought up to speed or slower speed in this case, and weigh in on any comments.
I didn't get the joke right away, but I was slow on that one. Okay.
Unfortunately, we are not, our cybersecurity policies prohibit us from using thumb drives.
Okay. Well,
Uh,
it's not drastically different. And if I can remember what I added, I'll certainly speak
Okay,
to it.
we'll talk through it, but I know there were a few details that didn't maybe get into it, but what we'll do is
We'll take the
tomorrow
final,
email
yeah.
us the final version. We'll update everything online.
Sure thing. Well, thank you, Karen, members of the board, Mayor, and thanks for having us. We're glad to speak today about the Road Diet Project. Next slide, please. Just going to briefly talk about our project team, give an overview where it is for context, some of the goals and objectives of the project, what's out there now, what the plan is, and the things that we're considering during design. Take you through the federal aid, New York State DOT, exciting, riveting process to get through that we required to follow in order to satisfy the grant requirements. Talk a bit about the schedule, some environmental considerations, agencies we've been coordinating with and will continue to. And then I leave it to the board if there are any questions. Next slide, please. So of course, this project is being led on the village side by Karen, Maddie, and Paul. Can you back
She'll
up
go
one
back.
slide?
I think we went too far. Thank you.
I'm representing Creighton Manning along with Don here. We're handling the majority of the project, the design itself, the traffic analysis, and all of the coordination with DOT, as well as other agencies. We're supported by Labella Associates, who's helping us also with traffic and public input. OSPA Engineering is our environmental sub-consultant, also a disadvantaged business enterprise, as well as Civil Tech, who performed our survey at the beginning of the project, also a DBE. Creighton Manning was founded in 1965. Just a little bit of background. We're headquartered out of Albany, but we do have Poughkeepsie and White Plains offices. We did also have an office on Main Street that did transfer to White Plains the beginning of last year. So we're very familiar with the area. We have a history here. And what we specialize in these types of projects, transportation infrastructure for municipal clients. As mentioned, just shy of a mile between Cedar Place to the south and Cedar Lane, Snowden Avenue to the north, with Croton Ave smack in the middle. Next slide, please. So what are we here to do? So the very term, name of the project, Road Diet. We are, as Karen mentioned, reducing the area back from the 2 lanes in each direction to 1 lane each direction. And that's consistent with the area as being bookended by 1 lane sections. So it's just a continuation of the 1 lane in each direction through this just shy of a mile section. And the intention, of course, is to kind of undo what was done in the past, the unintended consequences. You know, maybe at the time of urban renewal, the 2 lanes in each direction, the goal was to get cars through. And it's not very conducive of a village environment that you have to bear this. It's almost like once it opens up, the cars come flying through, and it's like an alternate to 9A. So really, we want to restore that village feel. promote the economic growth around here, and reconnect the east side with the west side. Give the folks on the east side a safer way to get to the west side and use your town, use your village, excuse me, the businesses, the train station, waterfront, etc. Really, the focus is on pedestrian safety and walkability. By tightening the road, we're shortening the crosswalks. We're going to replace 4 of the traffic signals out there, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the plan. We have 1 signal that also we're upgrading. We're going to leave the bulk of the infrastructure, but upgrade it to current standards. And then we're going to add a signal. And again, I'll speak to that. All of the curb ramps at all of the crossings will be upgraded to meet ADA standards, whether they, they've been mostly checked and most of them do not. So we'll be handling that. And of course, as part of this, improving access to transit, the Beeline bus. Improving, and this also improves vehicular safety. It is more of a complete street effort here. So by calming the traffic, the intention is to slow the vehicles down and create less opportunity for accidents to occur. And last but certainly not least, improve the parking by adding upwards of 118. That's the current count, but somewhere in that 110, 120 neighborhood, subject to DOT review, of course, it is their road. But that many on-street parking spaces are planned on both sides of the road. And then I'll speak to an additional 33 parking spaces being looked at in an independent parking area near Havel Street. Just some facts and figures in case you're not aware. In 2024, the average daily traffic was upwards of almost 21,000 vehicles per day in both directions. And speeds are tracking at about 37 northbound, 38 southbound. The speed limit, of course, posted is 30. So folks are just inevitably doing what they feel most comfortable doing. And that's usually where that 85th percentile number works out. It's what most drivers just drive because that's what they're used to and comfortable doing. Couple photos just to take you through existing kitchens. I'm sure everyone's aware, but just to walk through from the south to north, starting just north of the project limit, Milton and South Highland. And then walking up to Church on the left, coming up the hill there. Now we're at Croton, going up to the right, and then the division of North and South Highland. Denny and Aqueduct looking the other way, looking back towards Croton. Here are Van Cortlandt and Montgomery, school up to the right. And our northern limit at Snowden and Cedar. Okay, this needs to be rotated. There we go. So this is by and large the plan. Again, subject to New York State DOT review. They have seen this in concept. It is not drastically different from what they've already seen. And it is the result and the compilation of a lot of traffic study that essentially tells us how long turn lane needs to be, how long turn lanes need to be. And then coupled with available space for parking, lane widths, and et cetera, make it all fit within your existing curb lines. The intention is to preserve those curb lines and never go beyond them, but only come closer to the center of the road. So walking through the first big item here is we're going to replace the signal at Milton and Waller with a new mast arm, not too very similar to what was done at the Five Corners in Main Street. Similar approach. That type of signal is going to be echoed throughout the corridor here. A host of new parking on either side of the street, just on this sheet alone, 17 spaces we're looking at. In front on just on the Milton side, we're looking at anywhere from 5 to, it's not determined yet final, but a certain number of spaces could double as a drop-off area for the school. And the idea is now that right lane becomes parking, you don't have the, it's encouraging folks to use that space instead of M Milton and clogging up M Milton. So there'll be like some sort of a 7 to 9, whatever is the beneficial time period for drop off and pickup. that would something we're exploring. Dedicated turn
You're
lanes,
exploring that, why?
to benefit traffic on Milton, to benefit the school district.
Who asked for that?
I don't recall, Paul. Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's sort of news. All right, we'll table that. That's actually a new item.
Okay.
So, okay,
It's and again, it's a concept, it's a thought, it's being considered. Okay, we can move to the next slide.
Before we leave this neighborhood, I just have one statement. I
Sure.
believe one of the times that we did meet with DOT, that from Cedar Place to Wilton Place, that was to be, they had said that they'd rather see that, I think, as all a turning lane. Am I correct, Paul? I believe that I am correct. I think they wanted that whole stretch to be a turning lane. I remember that vaguely. So I'm just,
Okay.
need to go back and check our notes.
Yeah, if you have any input to share, obviously we'll take that. They have reviewed and they are continuing to review. So, we'll take that into consideration along with any other comments you might have.
I've got, since we're commenting on slides as you go.
Yeah, sure.
If you could go back one more, go back one. Yep. I guess, I thought, to me, this all made sense. And first, I want to thank you for all the work and the effort that you and the entire team have put into this. It's clear there's a lot of work and thought that's going into this. So
Appreciate that.
Thank you. Right. So I travel this intersection regularly, because I live up the hill. And so my only comment on this, and all my comments are going to be related to specific parking spots, is the spot, the furthest north spot on the western side of the street at the turn. Right, there's that one spot that's like in between the driveway and the corner there.
Okay, yeah, I see what you're talking about.
People turn in there at that intersection quite often. Like they're often like swinging wide, either wide coming from
Yeah.
Hamilton or around the corner there. They're just something to consider in terms
And
of.
as you're
turning
mentioning it,
radiuses.
as I'm looking at it, I can picture it in my head. That's the kind of space that might be considered for removal in favor of vehicular movement. Even if all of the turning radii and everything say it's going to work, practically speaking, that's why we're kind of at that 118 plus or minus. Certainly things like that we'll take a closer look at in the details for the final plans. I think this here is an effort to just try to maximize as much parking as possible with the available space. So things like that, I certainly appreciate the comment. Thank you. Okay, next as we move north. Oh, can you back up one, please? Thank you. So now there's on that east side of the road in front of the high school, there's a host of new parking. And I should mention the X boxes, if you will, striped out. That's to help drivers either pull forward and out or back in, and give folks a little bit of a buffer to move around without really compacting those spaces tightly. This will carry that two-way turning lane down the center. And I'll touch on that again on the next slide because it's important with Church Street. But curb ramps on the other side of the street, the west side, because we're instituting those boxes, we do lose quote unquote 2 spaces, but the net gain on this sheet alone is 18 spaces. So, and that's a trend as we move forward, we continue to gain. As you'll see, new curb ramps on the corners. That's the most for this slide. Moving north on the next slide, please. Church Street. So number one, coming out of Church up the hill, the concept of putting the hatched median right down the center of Church is really to benefit emergency vehicles. When I used to work here, coming out of here every day, and as you all know, that will back up. And really that's to clear a path and give emergency vehicles, the fire department and so on, police department, a chance to get up that hill and out into Route 9 with a lot less interference than they presently do. And then you'll still have the left and right turns out of there. A few parking spaces here, which will help. Upgrading the signal at Church, not replacing. But replacing the signal at Main, and the primary reason for that signal is pedestrian benefit, because it is predominantly the one-way traffic, but we do need a signal to allow the lefts going into Main coming north. On the corner of Main, you note that the curb comes out considerably. That is to really kind of get rid of that sea of asphalt, if you will. Restore that to pedestrian use, whether it's a plaza space or a landscaped area or what have you. It could just be sidewalk, storefront use, to be determined. But the idea here is to really tighten that up and decrease the folks that are just kind of flying through and coming down that right turn there. Continuing on to the next slide. Okay, we're at Broadway and Croton now. Similar logic for the right turn going on to Croton. We restore that as somewhat of a normal right turn bay. And again, convert that space to either, again, like a plaza, sidewalk, low-lying landscape, something of that sort. Optimizing the crossing distances here. And one thing I want to point out that the DOT was insistent on in our earlier traffic back and forth with them is that they want to make sure, because what we did was we said we can shave a little time off the signal if we take away the independent pedestrian phase. Pedestrians would just go with the green light in the direction of traffic. And they were insistent that what's there now remains. And we agree, we don't disagree with that. From a safety standpoint, that's far and above of what we were recommending. We were just trying to balance everything. There's a lot to balance here, keep cars moving at the same time, keeping people safe. But the DOT wants that stop in all directions so folks can cross. The exception of that is that right turn out of Broadway. But all other directions would stop. And that's going to continue to be the theme here at their request. Additional parking again on both sides, upwards of 19 on this sheet alone. Replacing the signal again, that the mast arm on Broadway will be replaced, and then the span wire, which has the poles on both sides and the wire across, gets replaced with other mast arm signals, again similar to Main Street. Out in front of the community center here, more parking. And we can continue on north to Aqueduct and Denny. And here we are proposing a new signal that doesn't exist now. The primary goal of that signal is pedestrian safety. A lot of folks cross here, as you all know, in the hollow. It's to benefit children and mostly schools, the bus drop-offs and whatnot. It will also double as sort of having a, if you can imagine, like a metering effect for southbound traffic. That light turns red. That might help clear out some of the traffic at Croton, which is to the left of this. So there's that benefit as well. This system will, and by the way, this signal system will all be talking to each other, communicating. Signals will communicate with each other, which they don't do now. So it meets the signal warrants and it's encouraged by the DOT. So everybody's in support of it, you know, at least on the DOT side, that would be able to say yes or no, they're in support. So that's certainly being advanced. Again, new curb ramps, dedicated turn lanes to get in and out. And it really does help the folks on the side streets get out a lot better than they can now. That's another added benefit. Moving north. Coming around the curve by Havel, carrying that two-way turn lane down the center of the road. And I should have mentioned this earlier, but that two-way turn lane not only allows folks to turn, but it also creates a de facto open center lane for emergency vehicles. That should not be clogged with stacked cars. For the most part, an emergency vehicle should be able to drive down the center lane. It's good because it won't be occupied by as many vehicles. So there's a benefit there. Parking on Route 9 again, not so much in this area, but some. and curb ramps, and I'll talk about this potential offset parking along with Paul in a moment at Havel Street, because we're sort of working that into the concept at this time. Next slide, please. Okay, now we're at Van Cortlandt and Montgomery. And new signal here again, replacing the existing mast arm signal, new curb ramps, various parking spaces on both sides, upward of 18 on this sheet. And aside from the turn lanes at the intersection, carrying that two-way left turn lane throughout. Pretty straightforward here. And again, consideration of the parking on those corners where it's a little tight for the turns and the large vehicles, the fire trucks and the school buses. Next slide, please. Thank you. Next, and then we're at our northern limit, essentially here at Snowden and Mavis Tire and the gas station. We are not planning to touch this signal. Partly budgetary and partly because we don't feel that we really need to. But we are playing with the lanes here, some of the striping, and we're working through that with DOT right now, bumping out that west side and providing that shorter crosswalk on the Snowden corner. Right, that does show that emergency vehicles and larger vehicles can make that turn. We'll just make sure that that's the case throughout. As you can see, it does bump out into the lane quite a bit.
A question here. You mentioned that this light is not being changed at all. The previous lights talk to each other. Will this be included in that communication?
That's still subject to coordination with the DOT and how they want it. If they want this signal, because I know that they are looking at other signals beyond our limits, because there's that certain thing of like, we can fix our little 1 mile stretch, but what's that going to mean once you leave the 1 mile stretch? So they're looking at other opportunities to coordinate beyond just our project, to make sure that there's going to be a certain limit at which it's no longer going to be feasible, but they could be looking on their own at upgrades here.
Can you explain what is the value of the communication of the lights?
They can adapt to the traffic conditions in real time. Currently it's technology, and all of the signals will have video detection instead of the loops in the ground. It seems like older technology now. I still use it, but DOT is moving towards video, and then the computer cabinets and the software can predict and learn essentially. Okay, at 4:37 p.m. I'm going to have a really bad. It's not just fixed every day to the same. It can learn on the fly and adjust and provide more green in this direction or that direction. And say, well, if I'm going to let green out here, I don't want it to be red there because then I'm going to cause a jam. So the communication is such that it tries to avoid creating unintended problems.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's any signal that needs work is that one. Because have you ever sat on Snowden Avenue through 4 cycles to try and get out of there? The timing on that light is horrible.
Agreed.
So that's something that really needs to be, I think, brought into the project.
Yeah, we'll certainly look at if there's timing adjustments we can make without actually replacing anything. Timing is free essentially.
That's fine.
So definitely appreciate that. And, we'll take that. We'll look at that and see how that factors into the whole study for sure. Thank you. So the next slide is still a concept that is in development, and on the version in my pocket, I filled out this table here, but the existing parking spaces ranges from about 25 to 30 on Havel Street now, and we're looking at displacing that parking onto 2 dedicated rows of pull-in and back-out parking on either side of Havel Street on the old North Highland alignment there. The The state owns the property up to the sidewalk on the back of the sidewalk on the other side of the street. So everything you see in front of, say, those purple delineators for the parking is state owned and state property. They will allow that parking to move forward under they call it a use and occupancy permit. So in other words, the village will build it and pay a small fee each year to have a parking lot in the state right away. The history, I would turn to Paul to describe a little bit better as to the nature. I know there's a movement on Havel Street to sort of displace that parking.
Good evening. So real quick on Havel, we want to take the opportunity while we're dealing with the state, and we do know that it is, there's a level of bureaucracy when you try to do something with them. We want to take advantage of trying to incorporate our Havel Street program into the project, since we're going to have a contractor there working in the right of way at this time. So with that, I know the various boards over the years, and then this board now is going to consider how to handle the existing condition on Havel Street, which is a very narrow lane, one side on a sidewalk, but definitely does not accommodate the parking that's allowed there now when there's two-way traffic, and it jeopardizes vehicular and pedestrian safety. I think we're all very familiar with that area. If you're not, you can travel down there any time of the day and you will see it firsthand. That's only exacerbated by the fact that there's a middle school and an elementary school at the top of the hill, which at any time during the school day, we want to make sure that we have appropriate emergency access and egress. So on that note, one of the things we wanted to facilitate the board with is the option, should you choose to go that way, of eliminating parking just for presentation tonight, but nothing in stone, from this intersection you see here up to Sabrina Lane, where Havel Street does become wider again and can facilitate parallel parking on the one side of the road, which would be the southern side, and still have safe two-way traffic and pedestrian thoroughfare on the sidewalk. So essentially between this intersection here and Sabrina Lane, this parking would allow you to consider eliminating parking on Havel altogether between that section, and thereby having two safe lanes of travel. It would be easier for snow removal. It would be safer for pedestrians, and also we'll have a unobstructed thoroughfare for emergency access, not just to the school, but for any area up there.
So this is replacing, this is not adding to the number.
So
Well, it's a few more probably.
right,
'cause
so
you fit a few more, but
it's really tough to count the cars that are parked there now, because there's cars that park in front of their own curb cut, because it's kind of a hodgepodge down there. So we're trying to formalize it with fixed spaces. I think, what did you say? There was 30 spaces plus or minus. We're going to cut into the hill there. Right. And just a very quick drive by there, I counted approximately between the parking in front of the house there now, on the northern side of that property there, and then the cars that park actually on Havel, there's roughly 25 to 30 cars that park there at any given time, and very often overnight. So that's what we're looking to,
so it's a replacement.
right,
Okay.
without inflicting that on someone. Maybe, you might add a little bit of a walk to their residence or business, but it benefits the corridor.
We've been
as a
dealing
whole.
with this for many years.
Yes.
Any solution is probably going to be welcomed.
That's where we are with Havel.
Okay.
The state's on board with it. They did mention what he said about the permit. And I'll give it back to Jared now so he can keep
Oh,
going.
we're responsible for it because we're.
Isn't there parking there now a little bit?
They're parking on the curb, as you can see in the picture there. But we,
But those spaces aren't there. Oh, I thought there were
No.
some.
no, that's a curb and a gentle hill slope,
Mhm.
sloped up to Highland Avenue. with,
How will that
uh,
affect the homeowners there, though? Will that make it busier in front of their houses?
Well,
Their
it-
homes there?
that's who's primarily parking on the curb now, I would imagine. So they would still be able to park there and then maybe have additional people parking that live a little further away. It's an older area and it creates for a, you know, tough condition, but ultimately emergency access has to really trump everything else. It's the main reason that I mean, this road, if you noticed, I don't want to expand too much to go back on your presentation, but we're not touching outside of the pedestrian bump outs that we're doing to limit the crossing time, because that really is going to help the intersections the most, is eliminating that crossing time that is a mandate by anybody that designs an intersection. You have to get pedestrians, I think it's 30 seconds to cross the lane. And by eliminating the 4-lane condition, you're basically eliminating that 60-second interval that causes so much havoc out here when it hits that phase or when anybody hits that button to cross the street, particularly during rush hour. It's instant. The pedestrian phase comes on, the traffic backs up, and it stays there almost in perpetuity until, you know, rush hour is over. We're looking to eliminate that. And that will be eliminated in every intersection because there's no longer a 60-second per crossing phase, which amounts to basically a minute and 20 seconds if you go this way and then you go the other way. So that's gone. There's more opportunity to cross safely and where you're trying to go. And that is really what, to go back on Jared's introduction and the impetus of the project, was pedestrian safety and traffic. And this road is wide enough and we're not touching the curb limits to facilitate the parking on either side in most cases, the travel lanes on either side in most cases, and the turning lane for the stretch of the road. The only areas you don't have it is when you have like a right and a left, but the road is so wide at that point anyway, there'll be plenty of opportunity for emergency access. The one place we didn't have it was where Church Street enters Route 9. And what we did there, after meeting with the fire department the first time, was create that crosshatch to get the emergency apparatus from, if they're coming from downtown, from Main Street, up into Church Street, they can run into that intersection that has the don't block the box now at that time. And we're essentially going to create what you have north and south of the village, single lanes, but this is going to be timed orders of magnitude better and more efficiently. So that's why we're behind this, because we really, you know, we hear people loud and clear when they say, how is the traffic going to get better? Ultimately, this is what I said the last time we introduced this project. We don't necessarily want to relieve all the congestion. Maybe some of the congestion is good because we want it to have a village feel. Like we said, we don't want it to be a thoroughfare. We really hope to upset some of the truck traffic that bypasses Route 9A right now, which is the truck route, by coming into the village. A lot of people, a lot of truck drivers bypass 9A, particularly in the rush hour, to get rid of the 134 Chappaqua Road and North State Road intersections. If you've been on there during either rush hour in either direction, you know what it's all about. So do the truck drivers. So they cut through here and they run all the way down to Phelps, and they either continue to go to Sleepy Hollow to get to 287, or they make a left and they get on 9A over there by Pace. So, you know, we don't want that. That's not what we want in the village. We want commerce, we want pedestrians, we want businesses, we want people to park. And this is going to, you know, hopefully stimulate all that as a collateral benefit to the traffic and the more efficient traffic and the pedestrian safety. We're creating the 118 spaces, give or take. Even if it's 100, it's still 100 more than we don't have now. And it has just multiple benefits, not just for residences. It has overflow parking for the Caputo Center. It's going to service our own 200 Main Street for parking that right now we would love to put on the rolls and move that building. And now we're going to have, you know, within very close proximity, 30 or 40 spaces for that building. And very safe thoroughfares for people to cross in and all around that building and everywhere else on Main Street. It's the intersection redesign out here is hopefully going to relieve a lot of traffic that builds up Croton right now. On the heels of this, I'm sure we're going to be able now, when that's done, to go on our own, to go on our own signals and study the timing that we have on the signals going up the hill. That's going to be another benefit we're going to get from this. There's a lot of little benefits that are going to trickle out of this once implemented, not to mention the, a lot of the gathering space that we're going to be able to create in the upper Main Street and the right out here on Croton Avenue area as just not just safe havens, but property for us to do as we see fit. And the DOT is totally behind it. And they're not paying for it, which might be a big part of it, but that's okay. That's okay. We're gladly paying for it through the grant that the manager's office procured, and they're really letting us take the lead. They are making it, there's a little administrative burden here with some of the hoops we have to jump through with permitting, but it's all going to be well worth it, in my belief.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
Yes, thank you. One other benefit that somewhat goes overlooked is even outside of rush hour, in the off-peak, the other 20 hours of the day, if you will, still reducing to one lane helps bring speeds down. You get rid of that 2-lane each direction thoroughfare feel and have the benefit of that village feel, and that's going to slow folks down. You'll always have your stragglers and whatnot, but for the most part, it should help to control traffic, even outside of rush hour. Next slide, please. Just some of the things we always think about, not only for this project, for most projects that we do, we certainly want to avoid or minimize impact to utilities. And because of the nature of the project staying within the curb lines, that's going to be by and large achievable. We do need to install a few drainage basins because we are putting bump outs and changing some curb. So we need to make sure we just capture any stormwater that may stray, so and put it into the system. But aside from that, we're really not impacting very many utilities. Of course, remaining within the public right away, once you go past that line, you've added another 1.5 to 2 years to your project and you have to acquire property. So fortunately, there's a lot of state right away here that we're working with. And again, we're not going past the back of the sidewalk unless it happens to be state right away. Maintaining traffic during construction, again, because you have ample width here, maintaining at least one lane in each direction should be not a problem. While you're working on either side of the road, if you need to close a shoulder or a lane, shouldn't be an issue. They'll use flaggers if necessary. Night work for final paving and striping. Very likely in this corridor, you'll have a much reduced amount of traffic. They can close half the road at a time and be very productive, and it'll also save, even though night work is more expensive, it might have a benefit because they'll be able to get more done in a shorter amount of time. So the balance might end up saving money. And then ensuring that all the driveways to the residences and the businesses are maintained. And if there is going to be an interference, I'm working in front of your driveway this day, that's fully coordinated between the boots on the ground and the business or homeowner. And of course, any trees, landscape, stone walls, things of that nature, we don't want to touch that unless we absolutely have to. And in fact, like I said, in some areas, we may be able to add some decorative plaza, low-lying landscapes, things of that nature that we're looking at. As Paul mentioned, this is federal money, and the village certainly has a contribution to that federal money, but they make you earn it. There are a lot of hoops, as mentioned. So I'll take you through a bit of that right now. Federal, because it is federal dollars, each of the state DOTs oversees federal money for the Federal Highway Administration, in our case, New York State DOT, and further to that, the Poughkeepsie region, region number 8. So they sort of hold the purse strings. They make sure we meet all the environmental and historic requirements. They verify our design, things of that nature. So you start the project, you've got your survey, you start your design, and you put that all in a report. All of your findings, your existing conditions, your proposed work, your preliminary plans, your environmental and historic findings. You put that in one document. They have a standard format that we follow, and they review it. Right now, we're in the process of satisfying all of those environmental and historic requirements. And then they'll comment, they always do. um, on the report and any of the attachments and the documents, we revise it. They approve it, and we're good to go to it is considered final design. Right now we're in preliminary. Then we basically have their input. We take that to about a 90% level, let them look at it again. They comment one more time, and then we finalize it. Bid documents, and then you bid it like any other project. There are certainly federal requirements you have to adhere to, but by and large, it's like any other project. You put it out to bid for usually 4 weeks, comes back, make sure you have the responsible low bid, and off you go. You give note NTP if you're happy. And next slide, please. And because of all, again, New York State DOT's involvement, the feds have delegated that each state's standards and specs are adhered to. So we have to follow DOT's highway manual, DOT's specs, standards, and the PROAG, which if you're not familiar, is the sort of the public right-of-way subset of ADA, the more pedestrian-friendly requirements, but it all falls under ADA, Americans with Disabilities. And where are we now? So in the grand scheme, Creighton Manning prepared an initial study prior to this project that you may be familiar with that led to applying for the money to even have this project become a reality back in the 2021-22 phase. The agreement between New York State DOT and the Village of Ossining was signed in June 2023. We were brought on board through a selection process, and we began design by and large in the spring of this past year and took it through the fall. The report went in mid-December, the draft report with all of our environmental and historic and such, our preliminary plans. Now, I should add that there's been an ongoing back and forth with the DOT on the traffic side. That is the driver of this project. How's it all going to operate when we're done here? So by doing that and doing the study and doing the multiple reviews, even before we submit the report, has great benefit beyond this point. In other words, they're not looking at it for the first time fresh. They've seen it a bunch, and their comments should be rather minor at this stage. And we've also met with them in person and on the phone. And we've gained sort of their partnership in all of this. We're going to carry detailed design through this year, probably through the summertime. Get that DOT permit that we need to do the work out on the right of way. And I should have added the use and occupancy permit for that parking area, presuming that goes forward. And then we're looking at letting the job out in the fall, and the benefit here is it sort of sets contractors up for 2026. And as you may recall, and it's in the industry now, getting signal equipment is a long lead time. Those poles take a long time to get your hands on, 6 to 8 months sometimes, if you're lucky. So by putting it out in the fall, we get what are called shop drawings. We look at them, we approve them, basically the specs and the drawings for the poles. They order them so that by the springtime they've arrived and we can start more in full in 2026. Next slide, please. Just a touch on environmental for those familiar with the requirements. NEPA is the national version of seeker, if you will. And it's a class 2, which is much like a type 2 in seeker, where basically you have no adverse impact to the environment by performing the project. The bats are all the rage these days. I don't know if you're familiar, but a lot of bat species because of the trees down this way. Really, all we have to demonstrate is that we're not going to impact them. We're limiting tree cutting, very limited here to make room for some signal equipment. That's about it. There's the butterfly as well, but again, no habitat for the butterfly downtown here. And then we're also have to satisfy what's called Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, which is basically to say, although you have structures in the village older than 50 years, everything we're doing is conducive to the village. We're not adversely impacting these structures in any way. So all of that gets documented and signed off by the village and the DOT and us, and the end result is no adverse impact. Similar on the state level, this project is consistent with the type 2, which is basically to say, look, there's not going to be, the village is in charge, they're the lead agency. We don't expect any adverse impact under seeker. Coordination, DOT coordination has been consistent throughout this whole effort. They're again reviewing all of our documents thoroughly. The permit, of course, consideration of the ongoing Complete Streets project south of here. Not so much that one's complementing the other, but just the awareness and I know the village is involved in some of those meetings and anything we can pick up from that. And I'm sure because of their experience, anything they want to implement here will get shared with us, and just general awareness that the project is ongoing. Except that the likelihood is, I mean, we're going to beat them to the punch. This job's going to be well done before they're done. So this project in some ways can set a model for their project and they can learn from it. And then consideration in 9A, the big 9A project. Again, far down the line, hopefully they can increase some of those vertical clearances, get the trucks back on 9A and out of here. So things like that, that's a long way down the line, but certainly thinking about it in the future. We did meet with emergency services within the active project back in September to just walk down the corridor, much like we did with the plan views, a little bit more elementary version of those plans, but we walked through it with the emergency services at the time. And that's going to continue as needed throughout final design. And we're available to meet anytime to discuss any concerns. Coordinating with the town of Austining as well. In fact, we have a meeting this Friday to review the future Stormy Town Road connector for Van Cortlandt, to take that in consideration from a traffic perspective. So we're meeting with the town's traffic consultant for their project on Friday to discuss that. And that's just going to keep going throughout, and then they can speak to it at their sessions as well. That is our project in a nutshell. Paul, you want to?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So before we open up the questions, I wanted to say one thing. The reference to the town and the school, we'll be meeting with the town, the school that is in the town, with the school's traffic consultant there. We met with them already. This is just going to be a follow-up meeting. So we make sure that the timing that needs to be facilitated for the anticipated bus traffic can be incorporated into the signal there. And the one question that I'm sure is going to be a question, which I'll try to beat you to it. The $4.1 million that they secured in the grant got funneled through the state. So it's coming back to us through them. And that's really why it's becoming their project in air quotes, but it's ours. It's just theirs. We believe that present day, very rough estimates are probably going to be a little in exceedance to that due to the new signal that we are being asked to put in on Aqueduct. However, we are presently negotiating with the state right now for some of their capital monies that they had already dedicated to the Croton Avenue signal, which they were going to undertake in the years to come. So see if we can get that money and put it towards our project to kind of bring us back to net zero from village contribution. But that's very rough numbers right now. We're really not going to be able to hone in on that until the state commits to that and until we have final construction documents to get an actual estimate. Outside of that, the next time we would likely be asked by the manager to come in front of you is authorization to go to bid, because the monies are already encumbered, and that would be the next step in the board approval process for construction project.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to make a couple of statements. Number one, just for sort of the public, the people who view this at a later date, since it's all being recorded. This project has been in the works, I think, more than 3 decades, if I'm not mistaken. Not this presentation, but the concept of what to do about Route 9A. So the question always in front of board members in any community is, what problem are you solving for, right? The problem that we're solving for, I think, has been mentioned, but let me just reiterate. This road, until you get to about Croton, looks a little bit like a highway, right? It's a 2-lane, 55 miles an hour. You get to Croton, it slows down in Ossining, actually. And the lanes go like 2-lane. It goes 1 lane, then 2 lane. So people slow down and then they pick up and go really quickly through it. It's especially dangerous in key points. Havel, with all the buses coming and going, and also people live there who are trying to come and go. There are some commerce there, car repair shops pulling in and out, etc., and taxis pulling in and out. The other area that's really a hot spot and really dangerous is in front of the community center, because the people coming out of the community center who are trying to walk have to run for their life as they cross that 5-way intersection, because unless you're standing there right when the light turns, you're not making it across in time. And people are going really fast. I'm actually surprised to see 37, 38 mile an hour being clocked. It always feels faster to me. The third point is the lights. So the reason we always have congestion right in front of Lucy's is during rush hour from the train, the lights aren't coordinated, so you get stuck. And then everybody tries to turn in while people are going at 9, and it just gets stuck for about an hour a day, 2 hours a day, both in the morning and then in the afternoon. And it just feels like so uncomfortable. People have complained that the name road diet implies that we're taking a place that's already slow and making it slower. That's actually not the case. The case is that there used to be places to park so that businesses can thrive. So businesses can't thrive on that area because there's no place for anybody to park, including 200 Main, a beautiful building that used to be a bank that's been sitting empty, I don't know, 4 or 5 decades, that can actually be turned into something again, as long as it has some parking. But really the community center is super dangerous. And then there's all the other stuff, the bump outs that have to be created. There's a lot of conversation about parking. There's a need for parking there in many different ways, but part of it is economic development. And it becomes in line as you go from Ossining all the way through Ossining, Briarcliff, Sleepy, by Phelps, all the way down. This is actually much more in line all the way down south and what the road looks like. It's just that we're sort of on the border, because Croton and north, it feels a lot more like a highway without stores and houses and apartments there. So when people and engineers talk about slowing traffic down and creating parking, it's about economic development, safety at the intersections, community center, high school, but also creating road that it was designed for. The fact that trucks cut through here is not advantageous for us. It's not good for economic development. It's not a safety piece. They should be going on the truck routes. The Havel situation, frankly, it's an old part of the community. It was built, maybe overbuilt, who knows when, the 70s, the 90s. We can't undo what others have done. We have to work with what we have, but this has been going on for 30 years. I got to tell you, I wasn't expecting this. I saw the presentation. It's really so much more than I was expecting. You know, the progress made 30 years and then 2 years is so dramatic. I mean, there's an actual plan, actual number of parking spots, actual thought to between the parking, because when you're pulling out into a busy road, you need those little boxes, you know, so that people can get in and out safely. Preventing double parking, all that will be enforcement. Fixing all the lights, that will prevent all the backups. But honestly, allowing people with children, handicapped, elderly to cross intersection on Route 9 without like jotting out, hoping and praying they'll make it across, you know, with their 2 kids in tow, will be a blessing to the community. And when I saw 2026, I'm like really, really thrilled. I hope that previous mayors, assembly people, and all the people whose careers have long come and gone trying to get this done or watching this or will watch it. I'm thinking of 2 or 3 in particular, because it just wasn't moving for a while. But I do want to remind the public something really important. This does not belong to Ossining. The issue here is that this is a state road. The potholes, the paving, all that stuff that we get letters about is not for us to touch. It is really the state. And I'm so happy that the state is stepping up and stepping into this with you guys to do the right thing for the community, because it goes to our community. It's not our road. It is a state road, and that is why you hear the state so much. I'm super happy about you guys proposing also, you know, the parking. And I'm really happy, I'm glad you asked the question, that the lights are actually smart lights. that there's a human once in 10 years who makes the adjustments based on traffic patterns, but that it's a smart light that can adjust at night. Maybe it's a blinking. I'm assuming that's what it is, that the red stays red longer, the green stays longer, depending on the traffic patterns and different seasons. At least that's sort of my concept and my dream, and that we're looking at 26 is phenomenal. So I'm sure there are questions.
Can I just depend one of the things you said, Mayor?
Lights aren't as smart as I'm hoping they are.
No, they are, maybe even smarter. But basically, we're putting the same technology that we did at Main Street at our 5 corners. So we have signal reads that way through video, and we have smart board there. Right now, we're running it on the very basic program. We're gonna look, and it's
Right.
running well. It's working well. I will add that in addition to it being a state road, when we're all said and done, we are handing this back over to them for their control. Now, we obviously have communication with them.
Understood.
I doubt very highly that they're ever going to do sometimes what we do around here with the blinking lights. The state's going to probably keep the traffic signals in place,
Okay.
but they will be signaled in such a way that either sensor or instrumentation is going to keep people.
Well, they're trying to
moving
coordinate
along.
for traffic. So I'm going to ask my questions at the end. I usually do, but I just wanted to frame it because people do watch these presentations. And even if they don't, when they write notes to us, when they email us, I'm always able to look at the clock on the video and say, look at the presentation from this time to this time. It's towards the end. So that's why we sometimes at these work sessions go through a few more comments.
One more thing you said was I started it, and you also made the parallel or the analogy to Sleepy Hollow and Terrytown. It's kind of what we want, but the one thing that we have better than them in our end result is we will have the emergency access via the turning lanes through the corridor and in our access roads. So that doesn't exist in Sleepy and Terrytown. That's why maybe there may be a little over congested particularly during rush hours. So we're going to hope to
Well, in
alleviate
fairness,
that.
all of Westchester is over
Yeah.
congested. It's actually
Yeah.
not a word. You're either congested or
Yeah.
you're not congested. But I love the over congested because it really says what many of us do, get stuck, especially during school hours. The entire county was built for horse and buggy 200 something years ago. And we're not more, we're not less. We're actually going to equalize where I think we should be, except once you get to Croton, I think it does change a bit as you go north, but we'll see where that goes. Shall we start on the right? If you have any questions, we don't have to have, but if you do.
Thanks. Wow, I've been in and out of this project now for a couple of years, and it really took some leaps and bounds. So it's exciting, and thanks for all your hard work. I have a question about the signals. The new signals, are they gonna look different in terms of how they hang over the street? Or, I mean, right now it's kind of on a wire across Croton and Route 9, right? Is that gonna change, or
Yeah,
will it look better?
if you like the other style at Main Street, then, and you think that's
Okay, so it's
better,
gonna be like
that's
that.
what they're gonna look like. Yeah,
Okay.
the idea is to, provided the DOT has no objection, to powder coat them black like the others. To sort of
To match.
aesthetically pleasing, it's certainly better than the galvanized appearance.
My one area of concern is that large bump out where you make the ride off of 9 onto Main.
Yeah.
Because I do that all the time with people going, and it looks like a very narrow. Because right now it's a little weird, because you go left and other people going right, and you just have to hope the other person is paying attention. Then there's usually somebody parking here, sometimes it's a truck. And then, it just feels like there's gonna be even less room to maneuver in there.
Right. Yeah, the signal will control
It'll,
the
okay.
folks that can turn left or right at a given
And I
time.
assume
So
the bump out will prevent all those cars that just casually park there, put their blinkers on and
it will
then
certainly
hang
help.
out there,
Yeah.
which is why you also have to go around them a lot. They won't be able to do that.
Right. And one of the things the state asked us to do, and it's in our preliminary plans, is to show the paths of fire vehicles, larger vehicles, to ensure that they don't get stuck, they don't get hung up on those curves. So
Right.
although it does look narrow, it is one way, and it's about as wide as a two-way street. So they do have room to swing.
Mhm.
And again, it's not 100% set at this point in time. There is some flexibility to move that, a little give and take there, if it ends up benefiting by making that radius a little bit bigger. But certainly the intent is to take a lot of that kind of open asphalt and tendency to fly down Main Street out of the equation.
Anything else, Stephen?
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My question is around the timeline. I notice that it ends in construction, and my question is around implementation and data gathering after all of this is done. To what extent, because I don't see it reflected here, might that be part of the scope to get a sense of two things? One, did we meet our goals? Is the traffic slower? Are there fewer accidents? Are people using the parking, et cetera? And two, in order to make the adjustments that to me are natural with something like this, you make this scale of change and, oh, we put that parking just like Trustee Yost said, we put that parking spot there. Whoops, that's not a good one. Let's remove that one. Is that something that you do in a kind of ad hoc manner, or is there a more structured way of reviewing all the changes after a year or 18 months
Right.
and then making changes?
Currently, we're not set up for the post analysis, if you will. That is something we could certainly, we're not going away, and we continue to be a partner with the village to help them. It's just not, formally within our scope to continue past the construction effort, but look, like I said, we're gonna be here. We're gonna be supporting the village. I'm sure we'll be doing other work for Paul and Karen. So we'll be happy to remain involved and look at the post construction condition.
Did anybody miss that statement?
Thank you.
And
Thank you, Jared.
yeah, to the point where, yeah, if you-
Spoken like a good consultant.
Yes, next
where,
job.
yeah, there's a parking space that's not working, you can say, we can recommend moving it, or signal timings. The DOT will have a good handle on and say in signal timings as well. They're very, although it may not seem like it, when you approach them about it, they're very particular and in tune with that. So, and if the village is struggling without it, we can also assist. So
I thought you were actually gonna ask something else in that vein. I thought you were going with who does that, because it's a state road. It's
Right.
taken us 30 years, not these guys,
Right.
but who in the state is managing the fix-its,
Mhm.
right? The
That's part.
school bus sizes are now all EV and they're a foot wider, and all this work that took 30 years to get now needs to be adjusted. So who makes the adjustments? The drainage not so great, all of a sudden they're icing over. It's not ours. It's not theirs. They're our consultants. They're not so I thought you were going to go with, is that part of?
Yeah,
So
that's
who's
why.
looking out 2
yeah.
years down the line to make adjustments? Because all I know is we're always told, you know this, Paul, because you're one of the people that tells me, I'm sorry people complain about the potholes. It's a state road. I'm sorry if they want more trees. It's a state this, it's a state curb, so when we're done with that timeline, who's coming back to say, like, even without the data, which would be fabulous, does the state have another department that comes back and
So-
says, like, or are we allowed to, like, how does that? And I'm actually looking more at Paul, because I think that's really he's got the relationship, although I understand the hitting up for the next job part too.
So I guess the benefit of having to have to deal with the state for these funds is we have to go up to their region and present to the Region 8 office and the people in charge up there. And they dictate to the local office that we deal with on a daily basis, if you will, for all those aforementioned items. You're right. The local office over there in Katona is they're busy, right? So maybe they can't give us all the attention that we think we should get. The regional office dictates to them what to do and what not to do. And they are basically taking up the lead in the review here and telling them, you need to be partnered with the village when they come in for the permit, because this is all, we're doing all the review for you now. Post construction. It's a great question. I would love to think that once we're done, everything's going to be hunky dory and no one's going to have to worry about it. Highly unlikely. But even if it's not unlikely, you want the state to know that the 5 million that the village just put into this is going to be taken care of. Because we're not only putting new signals and timing, we're milling and paving this entire road. We're, you know, it took them many years to do a few ADA ramps on Northern Highland, and they did about a dozen of them. And we've really mentioned that to them very often. We're doing them all, right? We're doing them all, and they're going to be brand new when we're done. And when it gets built right, which it will, it should last a very long time. But we want to make sure that they take care of not just the signals, but the road itself. There's inevitably going to be some utility work that takes place there from somebody, and they're going to be responsible for monitoring that and making sure restoration is done properly the way they do now with Con Edison on South Highland. So it's we have, let's just say this process has really stepped up our relationship with DOT in a good way. So we're going to look to further that when we cut this ribbon and stay on top of them to make sure that all the technology we just afforded them, they take advantage of it. We're not gonna forget about it. So good point. And quite frankly, I wasn't really even thinking about it. But yes, for sure.
Great, thanks. Pat?
Thanks again for all the work that y'all put into this. You know, I was going to echo a comment from similar to Trustee Lopez on like what comes after. And one of the comments was, one of my thoughts was, you know, which way is it easiest to make an adjustment once it's been built? i.e., is it easier to add a space or is it easier to take it away? Right. And so when we think about the final number thing like that, like that's kind of a mindset to potentially think about.
Good point. I'll tell you something about spaces. I don't anticipate any administrative block from them with regard to parking spaces. They're responsible for the signals, the road proper, and maintenance of the road.
Okay.
And the drainage.
Sidewalks?
Sidewalks. I don't want to have Stuart and I air it out right now. We went back and forth about this
Oh, we talked
very
about
often
that.
over the years.
It just occurred
But,
to me.
yeah.
Let's talk about it
Yeah,
different time.
but the parking spaces specifically, we're going to have a lot of ability to add and subtract based on our traffic experiences there, because it's not really part of the lane and the signal timing. It's really just parking. And if our recommendation is to remove it, they're probably going to say, well, go ahead and remove it.
Okay.
That's
Yeah,
likely.
because I was thinking like around that whole, like the five corners piece, like a couple
Yeah.
of those incremental ones could, you know, if stuff gets backed up, having a couple more spaces for right turns could make a difference.
Yeah, no, and we're gonna go through all that. This right now, I don't want to go back to the slide, but you remember those bullet points. We're at the final design report, right? We have a long way to go with
Yeah.
them when we really get into the nitty gritty before it
Yeah,
turns into a
Yeah,
construction
so I
document.
wasn't gonna go into any more of the details
Yeah.
about that, but I do like, one of the things I do like the concept of the lighted aqueduct. For, you know, because I do see that that's like just like a horrible hollow there.
Yeah.
And people like, if the average speed is 38, you know, like the speed at the bottom of the hollow probably averages 40 plus.
Well, the funny thing is that came to us from the state, which is a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Because they thought they were going to take away from the burden that we were putting on this intersection up here by adding that light. The collateral benefit is they were already going to get slowed down because of the, you know, we're shrinking the traffic throat. We're having parking there. We're having a turning lane. All of that visual does slow people down, right? Just
Because for me, like
intrinsically.
that, because you do get people trying to cross.
But having the
there and-
signal there is even better. It added probably a little, took away from a little bit of the traffic efficiency, but to the extent that it's going to help Croton and 9 intersection, and to the extent that it's going to help the pedestrians in that area, we gladly accepted it. But it was the next thing out of our mouth was, well, you added it, so now you got to help us pay for it. Because as you know, we just spent roughly $1 million down the intersection. So we're doing 5 intersections. So we do the math. It's, you know, it adds up fast.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Just one question. Thank you. It looks good. Yeah, you have a microphone over there.
Yeah, it was easier to get.
From top of Church Street through the Croton Avenue. You say these are gonna be smart signals. Is this gonna be set up with preemption for apparatus?
That was discussed. We just have to make sure that that's gonna play nice with DOT. But we're advocating for it. For the very fact it's getting through in rush hour is a stumble. So
Yeah.
Yeah, we want to make sure we work with the fire and emergency services and the DOT to mention that as a desire. They just haven't seen detailed signal designs yet, so that's going to be reviewed by them, and hopefully they would not object to that.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, great, thank you. Appreciate it. I think actually all of my questions were answered, except if you could just move over a little bit. Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you for coming. I'm assuming that, I know it's a long presentation, and I appreciate because you're all volunteers and you're spending your time here tonight instead of being at home. Any comments or questions for the board? Because we don't just rubber stamp. I think you know this board. We're going to be asking questions. If advocating has to be done, we'll call our state representatives that work well with us, et cetera, et cetera. And we're going to be spending a lot of time and money, because anytime we're spending time on this, we have at least a dozen other huge projects, multi-million-dollar projects, within a mile of all of this. So we're prioritizing. So anybody want to let us know? Problems, thoughts, questions, comments? Have you all been thoroughly involved? Any of this a surprise to you? I'm looking at all of you. You're all one group back there. Is that a yes? I'm going like, Nick, we're good? Okay, yeah.
Can you come to the mic? We can't
Here,
hear you.
I want the public to also understand that we involve, we need to make sure that ambulances, OVAC, Nick Francoso, ambulances, police, all emergency and safety vehicles, fire department vehicles have to get to where they have to get to. So how are we doing? Anything a surprise? Any question marks? This will be a time to let the board know.
No surprises or question marks. I think Paul and I spoke about a few things that's, like what happens during the weather, if all the, North High or South High will be, no parking for snow emergencies and stuff like that, but something to that effect. And I think a lot of the changes are going to be beneficial to everyone. Certainly will help achieve the goal of slowing things down through the village and hopefully
Okay.
get some cars moved in the right direction.
So the snow emergency actually was going to be one of my questions, but I figured you guys are thinking about that. So I don't think we have to solve everything tonight.
No.
You're taking notes, it looks like. So the snow emergency, whether the village will have to, or the state, or somebody has to deal with snow emergency, again, just something to put down. We don't need big discussions about it, right?
But I will say that that's something that the state will not really weigh in on.
Okay.
That whether we have snow emergency on their corridor or not, they'll endorse it if we want
Okay,
it.
good. Fredo, anything? Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going in the order.
No, I have,
Well, I'm
right now,
not-
we don't have anything, but,
Okay.
I'll tell my two assistants what went on, and if there's any other
Good.
questions or, I'll,
And you could tell the
Well,
folks, everything's on video, and they
right,
could
I'll-
just speed through the boring parts and
I'll,
move to what they
email
can hear.
Paul or any questions that we have. for
100%.
coming
That's the route. Any questions back there? Is that a question or comments or?
Mr. Minahan was just asking me about the location of the stanchions and what have you for the foot traffic from the schools, but those are all details that still have to be ironed
Okay,
out. Yeah.
so that's to come, but something like, I was taking notes. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Don is taking notes, even though he's off camera. I was watching, he's taking notes with all of this. Who did I leave out back there? Gentlemen, anything? You're good? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, folks.
Thank
I
you.
think we're good for now. This is a pretty big deal. I know. I
Oh, yeah.
promised a cowbell in the future when we do big deal presentation to spark some excitement. But I appreciate a lot of the work, Paul. It's probably your entire career here that I've been talking about this.
Yeah,
this
we've talked
road.
about it. Yeah, pretty far back.
It's
This is the first time we went about it. I will tell you, Because it was through a grant and we had to kind of make it a real formidable grant application.
Yeah.
We did do a lot of legwork in the beginning.
Yeah.
And the fact that I think we educated ourselves internally before we went for the grant. And then when we got the grant, we were able to take it to the state, which was different from before, where we just talked about it kind of holistically. And when you get all these questions and you really don't have an answer because you don't have a knowledge of what you're doing, it's hard to sell that. So I think we did it differently this time.
It's the advantage
Yeah.
of doing the big grants, right? You got to do all the homework up front to even get the grant. So great job. I mean, I know the staff also, I didn't say it, but Maddie and Karen, everybody, I mean, it's a big team. But I do want people to understand that as Dana had said too, it's been going on for a long time and now all of a sudden it's a reality. It's terrific. So thank you. And I think we're on to the next topic. Thanks, everyone. You can all
Have a good
stay
night.
for the rest of the exciting meeting, but only if you want to.
Thank you, everyone. And also want to recognize uh, Lieutenant Mayorano and his work on this, as well as Lieutenant Lance. They worked hand in hand. So OPD has been involved in this and a lot of our street calming and safety initiatives. So
Great. Thanks, folks. Okay, next topic.
okay, next up. So in 2022, we heard from Mr. Jeremy Wood of 3 Liberty Street, had proposed a wildflower meadow in
Mhm.
an area of Sparta Park adjacent to his property. Mr. Wood has submitted a revised updated presentation, taking in some of the comments made by the board at that time. And we have invited him here tonight to discuss his proposal for this. This is a village-owned piece of property, but it is adjacent to Mr. Wood's property.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Wood. I'm glad the presentation is up there. This is my wife, Katya. Her name is on this, and if I say something terribly wrong, you'll hear her French accent. We'll just go through this quickly. First, do I control this?
Nope, it's controlled for you. You can just say next. Just say next and she
I
will.
say next. Okay,
Yeah.
next.
There's
Okay.
there's a slight delay, but
No,
it is
that's
being
fine.
controlled.
First, the location. We should be clear about where we're talking about. The blue dot near the bottom, north of Scarborough, south of the prison is where we are. Next. The view from the air, that's Sparta Park along the tracks, Sparta Dock on the other side of the tracks, which is probably officially part of Sparta Park, I'm not sure. And the vacant lot we're talking about is the blue dot, where the blue dot is there, like on the other side of the sort of access road to the parking lot. And those are Scarborough Manor, those 2 building tops you see there. They're much higher above and they don't really feel that present, but they do own the land adjacent to this vacant lot, so that might come up. Next. Again, this is a different view. I assume you get it. The lot in question is in yellow there, if you can see it. Next. Okay, this is the park. If you haven't seen it, it's a park. It's got a parking lot. Some people come there various times of day. Some people drive and look at the view from their cars. Next. Okay, now things should get interesting. This is kind of this is the view, not doctored or anything, from like the road as you drive in and go to park. This is the view to your left, the view of the lot in question. There's a stone wall there. I don't know if you can see it. It's so covered with vines in the foreground and tree of heaven growing behind it. And I don't know if you could see it. There's a nice crepe myrtle in flower behind it, but you can't see it because of all the junk in front. And a big part of what we want to do is get rid of the junk in front. Next. This may take a second to load. It may not load. Yes, this is it. This is what we want to see. There's some video with this. I don't know if we'll see the video, but I don't know if you look at that image. I don't know if you can see, this is water, this is water, this is after a deluge. You
I'm
can
sorry,
see-
you need to be by the microphone?
I'm sorry.
So I can't bring up the video. I
Okay.
don't have access. Thank you.
Okay, you could see it. If you saw the video, you'd see the water is rushing there. It comes down the street, runs off in there. Okay, next. Mostly the lot is taken up with invasive vines and sort of as an improvement from my last presentation, I consulted with a professional. You're going to see his work in a minute, or their work. And I learned that the vines that take up most of the lot are not the kind of plant you want to have where the storm water is running. They're not just great at that. And I thought I would mention there, in the long run, this area might get flooded more frequently, let's just say. That's not immediate issue, and what we're talking about here isn't fully addressed at that, but the stormwater running onto the lot and the future possibility of more flooding, climate change is relevant, I think. Next. Okay, your next couple slides are from John Chechi, Landscape Architects. He's great, works on colleges, universities, DuPont Garden. Okay, so there's a path here. One of the comments last time was that the plan didn't really provide much of a public benefit in terms of a path or a place to sit. So we went back and put those in. So there's a nice path that you could see. It connects to the existing path across the way. And there are different zones there for different types of plants. Next. This is the view from the park. This work in the foreground in the park, I'm not really proposing that. That's sort of a separate thing. But you can see the stone wall that you could not see earlier. Here it's exposed and there's some nice stuff growing behind it and some artwork. And then the path winds around that. I think it's lovely. And the path, could continue there, and part of another talk, it could head north to the tidal pool. That is part of the park, but that's really not the focus, but I'm happy to talk about it. Next. I don't think we're going to look at this too closely unless you're really into plants. This is what the experts call a plant palette. In the plan, you saw there were like 3 zones, and here are the plants that one might use in those 3 zones. Next. Summary, the place should be a pleasant place, which it is not now, for people to look at, walk through and sit there. And I think it will support native wildlife in a way that invasive vines and such don't. And mention the stormwater part. One of the zones is actually explicitly a stormwater plant. So that is to deal with that. Next, if there is a next. Yes. Bottom line, in case you're wondering what's going on here, or Karen explained, Katya and I are offering to do this, and I thought I should put some words on that. So I put some words on that. The corporation has its counsel, could put more formal words on it, but the general idea is we'd do this thing, we'd work with the relevant village people, and we'd maintain it for 5 years. We could talk about that. And we won't sue the village, and we hope the village won't sue us. But that's it.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
I remember you came before us a couple years ago with another idea. What was it? It was this idea?
Yes, and I actually went back and watched the thing, and I remember your comments, and
Oh, what did I
made notes.
say? Was I
You
mean?
asked me how we were going to get rid of the vines, and I said, I'm going to pull them up. And you said, really? And then what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to pull them up again. You
Okay,
said, really?
can we, I'm sorry, sir, can we
Okay.
get to the questions?
So you want to do this? It would make, why do you want to do this, I guess? In terms of vis-a-vis your property's right there, but is it a matter of making it look better from your property, or is it completely altruistic?
I'm multiple motivations. It will look nice from my property. It pains me to look at something that could be nice and isn't, for lack of not a heck of a lot of effort.
Isn't there a really nice willow tree there as well?
Um,
Did it come down? Oh,
and in fact, I don't have a current picture, but it's now laying there. And I'm sure if I contacted
Oh,
Public
that's
Works,
so
they
sad.
might cut it up, but I'll cut it up or maybe leave some of it for natural purposes. But it was lovely.
Excuse me, here's what we're gonna do. Questions, we need answers, and if you answer, you have to be in the other microphone. I'm gonna start with a simpler question, if you don't mind. I don't know what you're proposing. How much are you planning to spend on it? Who's gonna do the work? How long will it take? And what will you be paying to have it done for 5 years? If you're proposing, I don't understand what you're proposing. What I saw is a whole bunch of computer-generated pictures, a whole bunch of palettes, which I've seen before. What is it that you're proposing to do? You, not the village, not our staff, not the building department, not our arborist, not our lawyer. What is your plan for that piece of property adjacent to yours that you and your wife are planning to do in the next 5 years? And how much are you investing in that? So I have a sense of what you're asking from us. Because right now, all I'm hearing is ideas. I'm not really understanding what you are asking for that we should be answering. And also ask you intelligent questions on how you're going to get there.
I recall that last time you made the point that it seemed more ideas than a plan. And this time I retained a professional to make a plan, partly
How
to
much
address
will
that
that
concern.
cost? How much will your plan cost to execute?
I'm going to do it. What it costs is my problem. I personally plan to remove the vines, cut down the tree of heaven stuff. I can do that. If it's too much for me, my wife, my daughter will hire someone.
Okay.
I know how to go buy plants and put them in the ground, and most of the time they live. I will do that myself. If it's too much for me, I will get someone else to do it on a volunteer basis, or I will pay them to do it.
So you had an arborist, a registered certified arborist, look at that, but the person who's actually going to do it is you and not an arborist. Is that correct?
Yes, there's not a lot that involves trees here, but I understand but I would be working in consultation with my super great landscape architect.
Okay.
And as it's village land, I will do whatever the arborist of the village wants me to do.
Okay. Back to you, if you have more questions. Okay. Do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any specific questions, but I appreciate the interest in doing this, the enthusiasm to wanting to make the space look better. And yeah, I'm generally in favor of this and I think this answers a lot of the specific questions that I have. It sounds like it's something that you want to take on. You need our permission because it's our land, but there's nothing happening there now or planned in the future. It's just kind of this space that has all of you call it like the vines and all this kind of stuff. So you want to kind of clear it out. So that's my sense is that that's fine from my perspective.
Thank you.
Bob?
This is towards Stuart. What, got my question. has to do with insurance, anything on our property. Is there something is there a contract that gets drawn up? How do we do this? Someone wants to work on village property, but is not a village employee.
Have to be a license agreement, that have to be insurance provisions. And things like that in terms of specifically what is going to be done. And in terms of how the work is to be done, how it's to be maintained. So there's a lot, it's not a standard license agreement because there's a lot that's going into this in terms of it, because it's actually a piece of property that's larger than Mr. Wood's property. This is a 1/4 of an acre. It's actually initially, when this all started back in 2017, the assessed value for the property was fairly low because the assessor did not realize that it was actually buildable. That changed. The current full market value of the property is just under $191,000. And it's actually zoned residential vacant land. But the former assessor, Fernando Gonzalez, was of the view that it could actually, you might be able to put a 1-family house actually there if you wanted to. But in terms of, in response to Trustee Fritchie's question, you'd need a very detailed maintenance agreement, not only maintenance agreement, but in terms of what's going on there. They'd be doing work on our property. We'd want to make sure they have their own insurance.
Right,
If
but
something
we
went
would have
wrong
to set
there.
conditions.
That's right. And I do have some questions, and I'd have to discuss this with Paul with regard to the flooding issue, because that becomes an issue that may or may not require DPW work as compared to whatever Dr. Wood is saying that he would do in that particular area. There's also, I believe, there may be a wetlands issue as well, which is another thing that would have to be considered within that particular area there. And finally, the last thing which you have mentioned is we abut the Metro North tracks. And so clearly any work that's going to be done, particularly depending on the type of plantings there, Metro North may not want stuff that essentially is going to catch fire easily. So that's a whole other matter, just dealing to make sure that they're okay with that. I should point out that in the past, there was some discussion at early board meetings back in the 2017, 2018 period about potential, Dr. Wood at that point had discussed possibly purchasing the property. There was a general view of the neighbors not to do that, to either use this as an extension to Sparta Park, to use it as potentially a dog run, to use it for a variety of other purposes. And that just basically stopped, and then we're back where we are now. So that's sort of where we started, because I was looking back, and first notation I have is from August of 2017, which is shortly after the certificate of occupancy was issued for the property where Dr. Wood and his wife are, which is 3 Liberty. This is actually 1 Liberty, which is the village property.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. There were a couple of questions that you just somewhat addressed, Stuart, around, being with the Parks and Recreation and being on the Rec Advisory Board. And, over time, I've become very familiar with what it takes to do work on village property. And the answer is generally don't. So some of those things. And I guess for me, one of the big questions would be, in starting this work, I went down and I took a look, and if you want to see a picture of the tree, I'll show it to you later. But it's a lot of work. And if it's you two doing it and starting it, to me, I would have concerns about getting it halfway done and finish, and then just not finishing. Right. And so for me, that would be a fairly big concern in terms of you end up with something that's halfway, that's just almost worse than it was when it started. Right? Even though that it's growing there now isn't exactly the greatest stuff. It's it's controlling itself to a certain extent, and you can cut it off at at your property line, and so, you know, you can, you know, do whatever, you know, you can cut back the tree of heaven there and from that perspective. But for me, that would be a big question of like just making sure it gets done, right? So and I don't see how that, I don't see anything, you know, from that perspective.
If that was that a question, should I?
It was just
No, it's a comment.
It was more.
But just from a history point of view, the first I heard of it is when our trees were bulldozed down. Can you just refresh my memory what happened?
Of course, Mayor. In August of 17, there was an inquiry from Mr. Wood about purchasing One Liberty. In October of that year, so that's again, little over 7+ years ago, Mr. Wood had acknowledged that he had removed 2 to 3 dumpsters of concrete from One Liberty and cut down some trees and vines. This board, Mayor, you were on the board at the time, did pass a resolution, in fact, authorizing litigation against Mr. Wood because of what had gone on with the trees. And there were ultimately, that the litigation was not commenced, but there was an authorization to do that. There was also some village residents had said that there had been a berm that had been constructed, which was limiting access to One Liberty so that it could only be accessed from essentially Mr. Wood's property. This again was back from 2017. This came before the board initially at an executive session in October of 2017. At that point, there was a village resident, her name was Elizabeth Harlow, said that the area could be used as a dog run. There were other residents, Florence Brenneman, Doug Tershin, Greg Meyer, and the late Joanne Tall, who were all opposed at that point to any sale. And then subsequent, that's when Assessor Gonzalez noted that it was initially valued as unbuildable steep terrain, but after he inspected it, he said that the only negative aspect of the lot was its proximity to the railroad tracks, and that he noted that the value of the property should actually be closer to the value of what Mr. Wood's property is. Obviously, Mr. Wood's property has a greater value because it has a parcel, a house on it. In October of 2017, the property was viewed by the village's arborist, who saw 23 small diameter stumps, no more than 5 inches in diameter. His view was that the ground should be reseeded and that most of the stumps should be ground down. It was at that point that the board had authorized the litigation against Mr. Wood. Mr. Wood subsequently wrote notes to the board, former Mayor Garrity, et cetera, apologizing for the actions. There was then a subsequent question. This goes to something that I was just mentioning before as to whether or not curbs needed to be installed, because it was thought that some of the work that Mr. Wood may have done may have contributed to a water problem at the area. I believe I have some emails, I think it's either from Paul Fraioli or from Mike Duffy, that it actually might well be the responsibility of the person who did the work to basically put curbs in. I don't believe that's been done, but I'm just pointing that out. And then the next really is not till 2022, when current village manager Diatori was going to have Mr. Wood attend the work session. That's the 2022 work session. I had noted a few issues to the board: who'd be planting the wildflowers, need for the hold harmless, how often would the area be maintained, will the public have access, and again, notification to the Metro North Railroad with regard to that. Mr. Wood in July said that he would sign a hold harmless, and that he, at that point, indicated as long as he is involved, he would continue to maintain. That was at that point. Trustee White, in August of 22, you indicated that if the village would agree to this proposal, that Mr. Wood should work with Jug Tavern and others. It would be a nice addition to Sparta Park. And at one point, and later that year in October, Manager Diatori wrote to Mr. Wood that he needed to contact the neighbors and assess their interest. I should point out that last year, I got a call from Bill Hanauer, head of the Sparta Association, former mayor, who indicated the Sparta Association was not interested in doing this and did not want to, essentially didn't want to roll with regard to it, and that basically it was left there. Karen advised Mr. Wood in February of 23 that it's important to have the neighborhood take this on collectively, and that would be the best way to come back to the Board of Trustees. And then in November 2024, after Mr. Hanauer had spoken to Mr. Wood, he inquired about coming back before the board. And that's sort of in the thumbnail the last 7+ years.
So what has changed? The last time, what was it, 3 years ago you came before
He
us?
was
What's
here
changed?
before you in October, around October
In this present,
2022.
what's changed in this presentation? What's different?
Well,
from the
what's
last
different
time
is
we
that the
saw?
neighbors are not interested,
So what does that mean?
that they're not interested in working with him on this project.
So
They're
does
not-
that
They're
mean
not
we won't
supportive
do
of
it?
it.
Can I
That means
speak to
you would
that?
have to do it yourself, yeah.
I offered to do it one thing that's different is I retained an elite landscape architect to make an actual plan because the concern had been articulated that I had an idea, not a plan. I did canvass my neighbors. I produced a petition of people who supported the idea. When the Sparta Association, which is apparently different from the Jug Tavern group, reactivated, I pursued the matter with them. Certainly some members of the Sparta Association were interested in helping, but the question was, what was the role of the organization and what would be the liability of the organization? And as I understood it, perhaps misunderstood it, there needed to be an organization involved rather than an individual. So I was asking them to play that role, and some people were interested, but Bill talked to the count and came away thinking that there were liability issues for the group to be involved. I believe that if I went to work and I am willing to commit to get the job fully done, whatever that takes, post a bond, sign a contract, whatever. And I remember in the previous iteration, Karen asked, well, what happens if you walk away? And I think the answer is it returns to kind of like it is now. But happy to make that commitment. And I believe that if we get the ball rolling, other people will not only use it, but want to help with it.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Dana? Okay. So, let me tell you why I'm not in support of your proposal. For the following reasons. Number one, our experience over and over again is that professionals have to do this kind of work. Individuals with all the best of intentions in the world, creating meadows is actually something professionals do, not individuals. They're actually people who specialize in it. You have a plan that's done by someone who's a professional, but you don't actually have a real plan that says this is what's going to look like. This is the plans. You yourself said that it's going to be you and your family members. So as Trustee Yost said, because he sat and worked on our parks for many years, professionals have to work on parks. Individuals taking it on usually find themselves way out of their league. It's not your profession. I mean, I think we can agree on that. Number two, normally we don't allow people to work on our parks. And that's the reason. They sort of think they're going to build a community garden and then realize it costs tens of thousands of dollars. And then it costs tens of thousands of dollars to maintain. There's water, there's this. Three, I personally am an environmentalist. That's one of my passions. There's nothing ugly about that lot from my perspective. From my perspective, a meadow is a more organized plantings. A meadow is also something that you absolutely let alone and let live. Part of the damage that was caused on that, sir, with all due respect, is because you bulldozed some of the land. You simply moved land, soil, rocks, stumps, and trees. Fortunately, not huge trees, because that would have been really awful. At the end of that property is a cliff. The reason there's hesitation in making it more of a park for kids and families is because at the end of that is a drop down. I don't know whether it's 30 feet, 20 feet. It's huge and it goes right onto a railroad track. So there has to be a whole bunch of easements. Lastly, when a community, especially that community, I used to take walks down there. You have a beautiful house. I lived right up the street from you. It's a beautiful area. On its own, it's a beautiful area. People take walks there all the time, but it's very small, very, very small. And as I think Pat had said, because Pat actually worked on that park when he was on the Parks and Rec area. They go and they look at parks and look at how to improve them. We just improved that park. The water goes down there naturally. There's nothing wrong with leaving something absolutely alone. That actually is also part of environment. In fact, we get a lot of environmentalists who keep telling us, stop building. Stop doing this stuff. We don't even like parks. We don't like cemeteries. We don't like golf courses. You know why? Because sometimes letting things just grow is actually the best thing for the environment. So aside from the aesthetics, because there isn't really a water problem any different than there is in any other area. In fact, there, the water drains right down the hill. And if you touch and keep moving the soil, there will be a water drainage problem. Unless there's professionals working on it, which I'm not hearing, there's an actual layout of exactly which plants will be used, which is what people who produce meadows will come in with a plan and say, these are the 5 plants. This is how they're going to look. Kids can't go there. You're going to have to build a huge fence because you could literally move the soil as soon as you touch it. For all of those reasons, I don't know if the way the last board suggested, Stuart, we should sell and the public good. The real thing we're supposed to do is say, well, if the land's worth 200,000, you could buy the land and then it's yours. And then you will have to get professionals to come in, make sure the drainage is done right and everything, go through the building and zoning and all of that. That's also an option which was given to you. Now the property value has gone up, obviously. The options are to leave it alone, open it to the public for sale, because if we can't use it for anything else, maybe we should sell it. I don't know if the board wants to do it right now. Nobody came in here thinking in those terms, but it's an option. Increase Sparta Park. It's not a great place for a park. It's not a big enough space, and it's sort of not so small that you would want to touch it. But the biggest problem I have is that unless there are professionals working on it and all the other pieces, I don't believe it's a realistic endeavor. And the fact that the neighbors in that community, many of whom have lived there a long time, will not participate. We've spoken to them. The village manager has spoken to them. Stuart, I personally spoke to Bill Maurer, who was the mayor here for a long time and very familiar with all that. They don't really want this to happen and they don't want to be involved in it. And so for all of those reasons, because we represent a community, not an individual on their own. I totally appreciate that you would like to do something with that and it comes from a good place. I appreciated that last time. But I don't think that's the best use of public space for the good of the public. And I also just don't think it's so bad that something has to be done to it. Invasive plants could be managed. They're not on your property. They're on village property. And there's nothing wrong with invasive plants if they don't go off that property. It would have been nice if more trees were allowed to grow there and didn't get cut down. That would have been good because when you move trees and they become stumps, you actually are hurting that and invasive plants come in. That's the purpose of also having deep-rooted trees throughout New York, is they don't allow invasive plants. The minute you moved that soil, the minute you bulldozed, the minute you moved those rocks that were there that we complained about last time and we're thinking of going into litigation, you, without any bad intentions, actually touch the ecosystem in that little space. For me, leaving it alone right now is an option, or selling it. Somebody wants to build a house or wants to do something else. That would include you. If the property goes up for sale, you too can buy it and enlarge your space and build or not build as you wish. For me, I'm not in support of moving forward with this endeavor. I don't know who else it is or is not, but I think that you've come here with a plan and you have a right to expect an answer. I only get 1 vote, so I'm only voting as one. My vote is to leave it alone for now, and then the board will decide whether, given the property, that we want to sell it privately, to a private individual or not. Can I start from here? Do you have an opinion or not?
I happen to agree with you. I don't think we should just leave it alone for right now or put it up for sale.
Those are 3 votes, but I'm going to go down the.
I think putting it for sale makes sense because
She is. Don't do that. She hates that.
I think putting it up for sale makes sense. You might want to purchase it. I don't know. You're going to spend a lot of money making it a park. But right now it's kind of neither nor. It's our land, but we're not really doing anything with it. So I think that would make sense to consider that.
And you?
I express support for the project. You make very compelling points. I mean, at this point, my will stay the same.
Okay, good. So it's 4-1. Let me just be very clear so I'm not misquoted. I'm speaking to you, Stuart, because I want to make sure, but I'm also speaking to you, sir. I'm not advocating to sell this tomorrow morning. But there are other options, and our job is to represent in the face of the public good. The public is 30,000 people. There are many boards that argue that if something should be sold and not just sitting around, it should be. That's actually an obligation of the board. I actually don't believe that. I believe that there's balances. I believe that leaving it alone is also a really good option, given where it sits and what it does. And I want to make sure that the public and people who want to buy that land don't sit here tomorrow and start calling Stuart and saying, you know, I want to buy that and build a one-family house there with a $1 million view of the Hudson. Tell me what I have to do. I'm not advocating, nor are we voting now to sell. So I want everybody, unless somebody here says they want to move that as a motion, I'm just going to say.
No, that would have to be a formal resolution.
I understand. That's why I want to be clear before we get misquoted. Because I'm sure you didn't come up in here to say to us, gee, I think you should sell the land on that property next to my house. I want to be sure that that isn't what we're walking away with. That is, it is an option. I'm sure there are people that would like us to put gravel and make it into a parking lot for the park. There are many people that have many ideas. We get a lot of that, but I just want to make sure that we know what we're saying. Your proposal has not gotten the support that you need in order to move forward. That property belongs to the village. I would ask that you not to do anything on that property because it does not belong to you. And that it just be left as is until the board decides that it might have a different solution. But the solution of a meadow or a park or any of that, given the scenarios described, is being declined this evening. So I appreciate you coming in. I don't know if you have more questions, or Stuart, or I didn't ask the village manager for any input or comments, since it does report to you, all the building and all of that. I don't know if you have anything to add, but it feels like that's where the board sits on this.
I don't have anything to add.
Okay, Stuart, did we leave anything out?
No, Mayor, we did not.
Okay, sir, do you have any final questions for us?
No questions.
Okay.
I respect the decision. A number of points have been made, and can I respond to them?
You can respond.
Okay.
The vote's been taken.
I understand that. There is no 30-foot cliff. The trees that I removed were Norway maple. They are invasive. They're not respected by elite landscape architects, nor are the vines that are there now considered good for the environment. In addition to removing invasive Norway maple, I planted a crepe myrtle, red bud, red maple, and a magnolia, which are growing wonderfully. And I don't know if you noticed, but you could see the pink of the crepe myrtle in that picture, but I guess it will remain obscured from view for the time being. Thank you.
I really appreciate that. Might I suggest, though, before Stuart says this to you, that unless there's an agreement to plant things, please stop planting there. too.
No,
I
no,
understand
that was,
that
no,
was an agreement based on other things that happened, if I'm not mistaken. Am I correct?
No, he
He just
just
went and
planted.
planted. Okay.
that was the earlier events.
Oh, that was when it started.
Yes, yes, yes. No, no, nothing since then. I get it.
All right.
I received a very nice letter from Stuart.
Listen, it's like my neighbor coming on my property and planting things. Good intentions, not supposed to do that. I'm just please asking you to leave it alone for now until there's another plan or another idea that might be good on behalf of the public. Please, then, if you have other ideas, that's lovely, but please, it's adjacent to your property, it's not your property, even with good intentions. I'm just asking you not to continue working on the property.
Understood.
Okay. Thank you. Karen?
Thank you.
Yes. Next on our agenda is a license agreement with 10 Marble Place, and this has to do with a property that has a mysterious structure on it, so that nobody knows who created, but now we're dealing with it and trying to rectify the situation now. So
This was before the board in December. I was not at that meeting. The mayor wasn't at the meeting, and trustee Yost hadn't joined the board yet. So, I thought it would be helpful to come back to just discuss with the board. And Manny would have been here, the former trustee Cazada.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so what we have here, Mayor, is the following. The property, and this is a survey, the property is at 10 Marble Place. It actually has, it's one lot, but it has two homes on it. The owner wants to subdivide so that he can have one home on each lot. Now, if you look at the survey, you will notice that beneath the property line is what appears to be, is basically an arbor. And Jamie, if you go to the next page, the next thing, I think we can actually have a photograph. Okay. If you can see what's to the left of the driveway, there is an arbor with a slate driveway. That is on village-owned property. We don't know who put it there, how long it's been there, but that is definitely village-owned property. Jamie, if you can go to the next photograph, please. There are 21 small bushes / trees that are along Marble. Those were put in presumably by the owner. I looked at an earlier Google Maps picture. They're a lot smaller. The owner, as part of the work that he proposes to do, wants to remove all those trees, the arbor, and the slate patio. That will be part of the work that he's doing to subdivide. He does not propose any other work except to subdivide, but wants to take the trees out there and take the arbor and the slate, the slate patio out.
Bushes or the trees across the street?
No, those little bushes that are basically where that car is.
Okay.
He wants to take all those out and then the arbor on the other side. The reason I wanted to, and I watched the presentation before the board. I also watched it when it was before the planning board. The reason that I wanted to come back is I want to make sure the board basically understands that the idea now, because this is something that came in after the meeting, is that the owner's intention is that all of this comes out. So that he would essentially, you just have grass where those trees are or bushes are, and you'd have grass where the arbor and the slate is. Now, the arbor and the slate, that is just at the entrance to Dale Cemetery. It may be that what the village would like is they'd like to basically have that maintained so that someone could sit there. Jamie, can you go back to that, the one picture back? There it is. No, there you go.
Is that a driveway to a single family home?
It's a driveway that is basically the home, the driveway to both homes.
That is a driveway. How did anybody?
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
How did anybody approve that concept? Is
Well,
that normal?
That I don't know. What I can tell you is the way the right of way is here, the right of way basically is about, and I had the measurements, I don't have it with me now. It's about 50 feet into that driveway is where their property line is. So this is all, that entrance there from the curb cut in about 50 feet, all village property, all village owned property. Their right of way literally goes in back of the arbor and in back of where all those bushes were put in. Don't know how it was approved. Don't know how it was approved to have basically two homes on one lot, which is essentially what you're not supposed to have, which is why the gentleman wants to subdivide it now. But the question here is the planning board and the assistant village manager can help me here, essentially said, you know, if you're going to do work on the village property, you're going to have a license agreement. The question is, do you want him even to do work on the village property? Do you want this arbor and slate taken out? Do you want the bushes taken out? Because they're on your right of way. You can say, no, we don't want, maybe, as I said, you might want to fix up the arbor and the bench there.
Are there any recommendations here? Because for me, I don't even know what's
You
happening
know,
here.
I-
And I'm
I'll
sorry I
tell
didn't
you
look at the
exactly what
video.
that was.
Oh, okay, Bob.
That goes back to, there used to be a business there. I
Okay,
don't remember the owner, but they used to do headstones.
that's
for
right.
the cemetery. Very old business, and that structure is probably where they unloaded trucks
Could be
with caskets or stone
good to know.
or whatever, but that's old. And so that's exactly what that structure is.
When the,
Correct.
what the one element that has changed, is that, Stuart was not here last time, as he mentioned, and neither were you, Mayor. The architect representing the property owner at the time said that the property owner was agnostic, whatever the board wanted to do. And the board kind of said, well, whatever you want to do. So that was sort of there was a lot of like 5 minutes of that. But now the architect has confirmed with the property owner that they are desirous of removing these elements. But the question is, A, does the board want them removed since it's on village property? And B, if the board does want them removed, what does the license agreement look like? And C, is it actually 2 license agreements because the property will be subdivided 2 different property owners 6 months from now?
That was my question the last time.
So my perspective, because I walk here all the time. Jamie, if you can go forward one to the shrub view. Yeah. So behind the shrubs, there's sidewalk, and there should be, where there's shrubs, that should be more sidewalk, but it isn't. And so you have to walk in the road. So you would think, okay, why not remove the shrubs? The thing is that the shrubs make it so that people don't walk on the property. It disincentivizes it, and it makes it clear, like, your sidewalk, oop, no more sidewalk. I want to get to the cemetery. I have to walk on the road on Marble Place. You remove the shrubs, now you're going to get more people on the property. That's not necessarily our problem, but it is a problem that doesn't currently exist, because the shrubs make it clear, like, this is where the line is, the sidewalk ended, walk on the road. In an ideal world, that just extends to, the sidewalk extends all the way to the cemetery, but that's not what anybody's proposing at this point. So my suggestion would be just to leave it, and I think that would be the best solution. I don't know why they want to remove it, but to me, it's just creating more problems for them and all the logistics that are involved. That's my
So
perspective.
that's the bushes being removed, but what about the other thing, the slabs thing, whatever that is?
The shed, art,
The arbor.
with the arbor. Yeah. Because, yeah.
That's conceivably.
They want to get rid of that?
They want to
Well,
remove. they want
If
to-
I can just
They do
add
wanna-
to that, if I can add to that, what was conveyed to me.
Oh.
Yes, hi, good evening, everyone.
Oh, there we go.
What was conveyed to me from the architect and the homeowner is that if they were to leave these items there in the right of way and then have to engage into a license agreement with the village for maintenance for it, they did not want to do that because they did not want to have an agreement and have to pay whatever costs they would have to spend in entering into an agreement. So if the village is amendable to not having them, they'd rather just have the permission to remove them. Unless the village wants them to stay there, but then they don't want to enter into an agreement where they're responsible for maintenance of them.
Okay, so.
Either way,
I need
there's-
to understand, why can't they do the subdivision without removing all this stuff?
No, the subdivision can happen. It's not a matter of removing the stuff. Either way, there's gonna be a license agreement because they're 50 feet into village right away. So there's no, because we don't want to take the bushes out or take the arbor out, that they don't want to get into they're gonna get into a license agreement, then it's a determination if it's 1 or 2.
Actually, no, they won't need a license agreement because if they're going to subdivide and they don't want to maintain, we would be responsible to maintain. It's in our right of way. So you wouldn't need the license because they don't want to do any work in that area except to take the stuff out. But if the board's view is we don't want any of that removed, then there's no
It's a moot-
license
It's a
agreement.
moot point.
But it would then be the village's responsibility to maintain those bushes as well as the arbor and the slate area.
That's gotta go. The arbor's got it. My perspective, the arbor's gotta go.
Yeah, I went down there today and took a look at it. To me, the arbor is a disaster waiting to happen.
And that's
Okay.
our property, correct?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay,
it
so
is.
they can't use that for anything.
At this, well,
They can,
They-
but I mean, they do.
they shouldn't, but it is on their
know of.
property.
Right. I mean.
Not that you-
It's on their, it's not on their property, but it's
I mean-
adjacent to it. So could they be using it? They might be. I don't know.
It-
They shouldn't be, but
If I could just interject, I think the other place we got jammed up was the architect and his client were led to believe that even if the village wanted these elements removed, they would need a short-term access agreement to get onto the village property to remove those bushes and to remove the arbor. If that is no longer the case, that really simplifies this by a lot.
if they're going to take the stuff, just take the stuff out, this very simple agreement to allow them access to take it out is all they would need, but they wouldn't need anything else. If it only relates to the arbor area, it's real simple. I mean, they can just come in, do that, and everything else stays, if that's what the board senses.
How
That's
big
what
is
they can
that?
do.
Whatever, gazebo,
The-
shack, whatever it is.
Joe, do you recall the measurements of that? I thought it was about 13 by 13.
Yeah, it's something like that, 12 by 12, somewhere around that size. And obviously, as you can see, it's not really in very good condition. So, I mean, it would be, and it's on the village's property. It would be probably recommended to just have it removed for liability. And if the owner is willing to do the work to remove it, just to get permission from the village to allow them to remove it, working on the village's property.
Yeah, I think when I was there today, I think the support 4x4s, I think they're just bolted into the embedded columns down there. So it's like really easy to take out. Personally, my perspective is that I'm in favor of the shrub staying.
I am too. I'm in favor of shrub staying and removal of the structure.
Okay, and I just have a question. So they can, as of right, they shouldn't have done this in the first place, but we're not gonna go back in history because there's no point to that. They can turn this in, they're already on 2 lots. They're 1 lot, but it's on, and there's no issue with turning it into 2 lots. There's enough footage, there's enough, the houses, they'll get what? They'll build 2 driveways, I guess. I don't know.
No, and
So-
after
so-
that, the mayor, they had to get variances from the zoning board, and those variances last night at the meeting were granted. So they're going back to the planning board just to finalize subdivision.
It actually. Subdividing it, in speaking with land use council about this, it will actually make both sites more compliant than they are currently.
Okay.
There's a little, variances here and there, particularly because of the shared driveway down the middle. This is actually long-term better, in terms of conformity.
So I'm hearing at least three, Dana, I haven't spoken, but I'm fine with people's opinions here. I'm hearing 3 people that are saying bushes stay, take the structure down. And I guess we can ask them to do it and make them pay for it, or we should do it because it's village property. You guys think the village should do it because the village should do it. I don't know how expensive that is, but it's probably unsafe. The question is, how do you mark it off so that I don't get this creepy crawly? The next year when I drive by, there's parking for 6 cars over there because they've now rented out that house to 6 families. Like, how do we also protect the village property from turning into somebody's private property, which I just have to have a whole conversation with somebody else about, whether we have to. Any solutions for that? No?
I just have an answer for what to get rid of.
Okay.
That answer.
All right, well, I thought maybe we thought farther down the road on that one.
Give me some time though. I'll give you some.
You walk by there, so we'll just walk through.
Yeah, I walk by there all the time. That is largely unused, ignored space, but where the arbor is. In the last 8 years, I've never seen anyone
Okay.
use it for any purpose.
All right.
And so I don't think even if it's sold and I don't think it would. And if
Okay.
you look at the other picture, there's so much, if you really wanted to park a bunch of cars, you could just park a bunch of cars. You don't need to go right up against.
Okay, so I'm gonna take I have not walked by there. I haven't had a chance to look at it. I don't wanna beat a dead horse. I don't wanna charge people just because it's cheaper for somebody else to do it. Unless the manager says, or Joe, unless you have a problem with it, I'm hearing that people, do you disagree with what's being recommended here? All right, so we're taking down let's not call it gazebo, let's call it a And, I mean, we can't take them into a park or a thing for kids or anything else for the public, so let's take that down and leave the bushes up, because that seems to be the majority presentation for people actually are familiar with this, so I'm gonna go with that. Any
That-
problems with that?
That would be fine.
Okay,
We have no problem
That's
with
fine.
taking
And if
things
the
down.
and if the village is doing it, there's no need for any agreement. It's basically,
well, the bushes stay.
The bushes,
no,
were-
what I'm saying is, if the village is taking down the arbor,
it's probably more prudent to have the village take it down. Our guys, this is an in-house job, I would believe. I don't foresee any
I can take
issues.
a bulldozer and do it myself.
We can, we did get you a hard hat, so you will be able to drive a bulldozer through it. It's fine. We're good. So,
Everybody's
yeah,
good?
I think that is a very
Done.
good solution.
Okay. Next. Thank you, Joe. I'm sorry, I didn't even know you were
Yeah.
on.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Joe,
All right, next.
all right, moving right along, making tremendous amount of progress this evening. We have also, there's Dale Brennan, our treasurer too.
Hello, Dale.
So Dale's here to discuss a resolution for next week to open up our 2025 capital projects, to establish budgets for them. And for those that have been where we've already approved the budgeted amount, there'll be a resolution next week, so that we can get those started. There were a few capital projects that were the board wanted to get more information on before we moved ahead with them. And for those, the appropriate department heads have been informed that we'll schedule work sessions to discuss those projects more specifically, to determine whether we'll go forward and at that point establish a budget.
So these are ones that we felt.
These are ones are approved, yeah, or that were approved during the adopted budget.
All right, let's
during the
move to
budget
the
process.
next thing. Unless somebody wants to discuss this more.
Okay,
Next.
so Dale, thank you for your very informative memo. It was very helpful.
Thank you.
The next discussion is regarding an immigration resolution. This has been talked about. We talked about it in 2017, and we also are talking about it now. It is being talked about in many municipalities, and certainly many municipalities in the county, in Westchester. So I would like to turn this over to Mayor Levin and Corporation Council to discuss. Thank you.
Okay, so this is as late as it is in the evening. With the recent election, there's just been some immigration advocacy groups, individuals, and really in every municipality, because we have such a diverse community here in Austin. There's been concern about what will happen to our residents who are immigrants or are married to immigrants or have immigrants in their families, vis-a-vis what position the village takes from a legal point of view. To be concise, and I'm not going to make a speech here tonight. We'll have a legislative session to look at the policy. The big, and we've spoken to some of our partners here in the community, whether it's the Children's Center, Neighbors Link, mayors in other communities. I spoke to mayor in both Tarrytown and in Hastings. We've looked at the Irvington resolution. At the end of the day, the big issue is if a federal agency like ICE, and there are many federal agencies, but if a federal agency comes into this village to arrest or look for undocumented immigrants, undocumented folks, what is the position of the village? And the village, mostly it's the police department as it relates to ICE. It is not a conversation about immigration at large. That is a federal issue. We don't have a border. We don't have border police. It is not who comes in and who goes out of Ossining. Also, not an issue. We don't have borders in a village like Ossining or in any municipality in Westchester. It's not a conversation about whether San Francisco is an asylum city or isn't an asylum city and how do you create, those are not the conversations because frankly, as we've learned, asylum cities don't apply to Austining. It's not something we can do. So what can we do? A board and its local elected officials and the police department can create policy about how they function with a federal agency under the current federal laws. If those federal laws change, we will comply with those federal laws. We do not supersede federal agencies. Immigration, narcotics, or any other federal agency. It is not within our portfolio. It's not within our right. It's not within our purview, nor is it for the police department. So we've researched in the past, I would say month, and we've met with, and when I say we, I mean a number of board members, village manager, chief of police, et cetera, to look at viable, let's call them solutions. One such is we did have a resolution 2017 or 18. The county has one as well from 2018 because the county does not override local law, but what it does is it does have correction officers, county police, and the county police also oversee Mount Kisco local police, and they have, I guess, a jail, right? Probation. So they have a type of police force as well, and so they passed a resolution. We've been looking at them on emails to see. We've had recommendations from immigration advocates. Every local municipality can do their own. In my opinion, we should have some coordinated efforts, but that's not for me to dictate. The chief of police here, Aaron Zimmerman, has had input. We've had conversations. Stuart Kahn had put something together, but the one we're looking at, and I don't have it on my phone, and I don't think it's linked to the agenda, is the one that the county did, because that passed through all of their lawyers. It applies to police. It's specific enough. And really, the two big things that I think the public needs to be aware of. Thanks. The two, yes, it's dry. It's not as sexy as some people want it, but it doesn't have to be sexy. It has to be effective. We're looking to put something for Austining that covers what our police department needs to do. And mostly, what we have to think about is the important aspect is if ICE comes into Austining looking for a person or individuals, they are allowed to do that. They have to have a judicial subpoena. It has to be signed by a judge. Administrative subpoenas by law do not have to be either by invitation or de facto have to be addressed by local police. The local police is not required to be helpful to the immigration agency if it's simply an administrative subpoena. It must be a judicial subpoena the way we will be looking at it. That's the big differentiator. What happened last time when President Trump was president of the United States and passed some of this immigration, at that time ICE came in and they used both administrative and judicial. We're going to stick very close to the federal law, which says that local police have to exercise with ICE when it's help with judicial subpoenas. Judicial subpoenas generally are undocumented individuals who also have committed a crime. That's generally what they are. It's not just, as people like to email, rounding up innocent individuals. It's actually signed by a judge, and that we do have to follow. We're going to have some discussion about it. I don't know if it makes most sense for me to read this. Thanks for printing it out. No? Okay. That's the one? Okay. I don't know if it makes most sense to read, but we want to fine tune some of the language. I have an interest in actually putting something out that was approved by the county for a simple reason, that I'm encouraging other municipality leaders to use similar language so that we're all on the same page, because we don't have borders. And it's important for our immigrant population to understand what their rights are, to understand that police departments actually are run locally. It's not a unified, in many countries, Latin America, Europe, actually most of the world except the US, and the chief and I discussed this, police forces are like either regional or national. But in New York, they're actually all very different, and they actually could follow different rules depending on what the local legislator, that would be us, right. So it's complicated to understand. And so there are two issues. One, that immigrants should know, our residents should know their rights. And we will be helpful with that because they have rights. And that we have been very specific, or would like to be specific, about what our police department should and shouldn't do under which circumstances, so that our police officers are not caught in a terrible position of not having clear directions from the legislative body of what they are supposed to do. Because that would leave them really open to criticism, mistakes, and some bad situations, in my opinion. And we've been through this once before. Even with the best of intentions, these things happen. So I am thinking we should really use the counties, which has gotten so many approvals, and hope that, and I know there are a few mayors that are going to be looking at the video from tonight because they've already called me, because they also have an interest in being consistent with their chiefs of police, with all of that, especially in the river towns. I don't know if I've left something out as far as sort of just framing it for people, because I know there are a lot of people. There is one more thing. I did speak with the chief of staff to the county executive, and on Monday I spoke to the deputy county executive, just to say that it's not just us alone doing this. I want to add two things. A comment that I got is this is not a local issue. We should stay out of it. It is absolutely 100% in Ossining for us a local issue. Depending on what study you look at, we have north of 40% immigrant population. Let me remind everyone, immigrants come from all over the world, not just from one part of the world. They're from Europe, from Africa, from Latin America, from Australia, from every place, Asia, thank you, I'm sorry, and the Middle East. We have immigrants from everywhere, and we have children who are born here, who are children of immigrants as well, and this has broken up families. So it is a local issue, and we will be getting involved. Not about the laws, once they're passed at a different level, but how they affect our own residents. So I just want to be very clear on our position of why this is important to us. What else did I leave out? Did I leave something out that is important just from a context as we move forward? I'm looking to both sides. I'm sorry if I'm only looking.
I think you covered almost all of it. The one thing is that you have the 2017 resolution, but then there's also the emergency order from the former chief in 2021 that's specific to the Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative that talks about the Ossining Police Department and its relationship to ICE, like going actually to the scene. So there's that particular order. That's the only other document that you didn't mention.
Okay, so the question is, I'm not going to sit here and read it. We didn't put in the agenda because it's a work session. We're supposed to be discussing it. I don't know if I read this, but I don't know if everybody had a chance. Obviously, we have to change the county because they talk a lot about their correction officers. They talk about, we transport oftentimes from our jail. Once in a while, we transfer from here to the county jail. And the county's position, once they're in possession, and that's, I spoke to somebody in the county to him, but you might enlighten me, chief, is once they're in county, that takes on, it's theirs, right? That person becomes their person. And now they follow these rules, whatever the rules are. If in 3 to 5 weeks, 3 to 5 months, the federal law changes under some mandate, under executive order, however changes, I have no problem in going back to this and changing it. I am not comfortable waiting 3 to 5 months till something happens. There's just a lot of people. It may not take, but I just also want to make it clear, there are communities, I don't want to mention them because the mayor's asked me not to, here in the river towns that are holding off till something actually happens or changes. They're smaller communities. They are not populated with many immigrants as we are, et cetera, et cetera. The cities like New Rochelle, White Plains, Yonkers, obviously are looking at this in a serious way. And Yonkers is 200,000 people. It's a very diverse community. So clearly their folks are looking at it. So I just wanted to put a context of why now, why this topic, and why I personally am looking for us not to recreate, but to go along and just change some of the wording to a village police force rather than you know, rather than creating our own. So I think that covers it. How would you all, it's a work session, so we're allowed to work and be informal. How would you like to approach this? Do you want to take another look and send emails in? We've had Neighbors Link already look at both this and the Irvington one and a couple of others. So they've already sent us what they've had to send us. They work with a lot of in their population. Do you want to revisit and put your own words? Do you want to do that right now? Do you want to add like a vibe to it? Dana, I know you're a writer. Do you want to add something from the last one? I personally, and I spoke to Dana earlier, I'd like to just say this supersedes 20 whatever. And Chief, I haven't forgotten you. I'm getting to you. Do you want to wordsmith it now? Do you want to wordsmith it at home, send it in the next 48 hours so we have it in time for next Wednesday? What is everybody feeling?
Well, I have to look closely at that document. I somehow managed to miss that one. I was reading the wrong thing. But I mean, I agree it would be good to have standardized language, but I also think that whatever we do needs to be very specific to us and our people. And that we explain a little bit contextually why this matters in Ossining. But you know, I don't know if the 2017 resolution, if it's that much different, is it?
It is,
Okay.
yeah, there's some specific.
Yeah.
Is it more specific as to police? Anyway, but yeah, I think we can, I think I'd like us to do something that's specific to us.
Okay.
At
so-
least if it's an, you know, an introduction or part of the revolution or a resolution or a whereas and a wherefore. But you know, just some context as to why it's important for us.
Okay, so with 5 of us, would it make sense that 2 of us look at this and work with Stuart on it? And I'm gonna ask the chief for his input as well, by starting with the county one and tailoring it to Ossining. Is that what you're saying? Okay, so we're there, and I'm not sure who the 2 is, but let's just start with their chief. Before I get into, let's look at this, put a time frame on it. Who's gonna move this forward so that we're not just back and forth, but actually moving the document forward? You read it, yes?
Mhm.
Okay. What are key points that you want to bring to our attention that we take into consideration in tailoring this for Ossining?
Well,
Oops.
I mean, first things, I mean, considering the scope of what a lot of these county agencies handle is considerably larger than what we deal with here. Like you mentioned, it's probation, corrections, public safety. You know, it's a wide bandwidth of law enforcement or law enforcement adjacent things that their policy has to cover. Locally, we don't have that issue. It's a police department. And there's a lot of things in this county policy as it relates to police that is covered by our policy that currently exists. So I don't know if we need to reinvent the wheel with some things that already exist in our policy that we've been following, you know, before 2017 and currently. So I don't know how much more needs to be restated in a different way. I don't know if we want to maybe, you know, bring things a little bit more modern, but also keep in mind that as a law enforcement agency, as a police department, we kind of have to stay politically agnostic to a lot of things. We have to follow the law. So whatever the law states is how we're going to govern our policy. We can't let, you know, I would be cautious to allowing private entities to impact our policies and the procedures. You know, we can take what they have to say, we can take their advice, best practices, things like that, and incorporate it into our policies, but our policies really need to reflect what the law states and how we're going to operate within that law.
Right, and that's actually what I liked about the county, is really it's all about the law, and
Yeah.
I feel
mean-
it's always easy to delete than to,
You know,
to start, but theirs is very specific, law enforcement.
I mean, you know, again, you know, our policy isn't 4 pages, you know, but again, a lot of that I think has to do with just the scope and the magnitude of what they deal with versus what we deal with.
Right,
You know, most other policies that I've looked at from other agencies, especially in the river towns, it's a page and a half at most.
yeah,
They're not very extensive. They're, you know, lack of a better word, they're short and sweet and to the point. You know, and they follow the color of the law, and that's how we kind of have to that is how we
Yeah.
have to operate.
Well, I have a question. you know, we can say that, you know, you can't be deputized into doing performing ICE functions. You know, we can have that in our law, but can the feds overrule that?
Yes.
That's my main concern, is that they're gonna go, oh, okay, all you police department,
Yep.
you're gonna help us. And I don't know what recourse we have there.
It's definitely, you know, I think I'd be lying if I said that, you know, couldn't happen. Do I think it's gonna happen? I don't think so. You know, but if the federal law changes, that will impact state law.
Yeah.
It just trickles down, you know, and then, you know, an unfortunate reality is that we can't pick and choose what we want to enforce when it comes to law.
That's, I think, why I stated that. The law is the law, and
Right.
and that's it. And if the federal law changes, then it changes. But as it stands now, it's where we are right now. I skipped you. You said you wanted to say something.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think it's worth. Yeah. I think it's worth noting. Really, there are 6 points, and of these 6 points that are really the core tenets of what the Westchester County resolution has, Irvington has, some of these others have. I think it's just worth naming what these are, because if you look at the 2017 language that we have, some of it is more values, like we support everyone,
Right.
or against anti-Semitism and xenophobia. And okay, but this is really what we're talking about. The first one is prohibiting municipal police from inquiring about an individual's immigration status, which, as the chief will tell you, we already don't do. So it's really only if someone is arrested, and then as part of that process, where someone's immigration status is noted as part of the process. But it is not like if you are stopped by the police in a vehicle and traffic situation, you are asked your immigration status. So really, that language is consistent with what we do. 2 is forbidding police from stopping, questioning, or interrogating an individual solely because of an individual's immigration status or because of a civil immigration detainer. That's where the Westchester language is particularly helpful, because it specifies the judicial warrant versus the administrative warrant. And so that language is particularly helpful in distinguishing. 3 is forbidding police from performing the functions of a federal immigration officer or otherwise engaging in the enforcement of federal immigration law. Here, what we're talking about is less the situation that you named, Trustee White, where what if there's a federal law, there's an emergency status, and it says, you know, blah, 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 blah. This is more getting to the OPD and escorting ICE, like that whole conversation. In that particular case, we have the 2021 emergency order from the chief that isn't necessarily reflected in the policies that currently exist. And so I think codifying something that says, here's what the protocol is important. The reason is because there are value. I'm using the word values in a very specific way. There are competing interests, if you will. On the one hand, you have OPD. Their job is to keep everyone safe. That's their job, and they do that job well. And so if you ask them, what do you think we should do to keep people safe? They'll say, listen, if there's something going down, we want to be there. If the ICE has an issue, if the community member has an issue and we're there, we can help. But if something happens and we're not there, then it's hard for us to help. Or if someone gets detained and then they call us and they go, where did my parent go? Where did my kid go? Whatever, then we're able to answer those questions, and those things can happen. That's their job. On the other hand, you have the interest that we have as a village in trying to ensure that every member of the community feels comfortable accessing the resources that they have here, namely the police. So if you look at the amount of domestic violence issues or anything having to do with kids, any issue where you would want to say, hey, go to the police. You were just robbed. Go to the police. They're not going to ask you your immigration status. They want to keep you safe. Being able to say there's a bright, clear line between this federal enforcement agency and the local police is really important in being able to do so. And so might there be a situation in which ICE is detaining someone and because the Ossining police is not there, they're not unable to help because of this decision that we've made? It is possible. To me, the benefit of clarifying and codifying the 2021 executive order is worth it. But then we have to take responsibility of that's the decision that we're making. And this is what we see as the greater good. So I think that's really where one of the key things that, again, the Westchester language reflects, as does Irvington. Some of the other ones, and I'll just quickly finish these last three: forbidding the municipality from transmitting any information concerning individual immigration status to the federal government unless required by law. Again, we're completely compliant with law, but if the federal government were to ask us, okay, give us a list of all the undocumented people that you have here in Ossining, that we, if they ask for that, we have to provide it. But if we don't have that, if we're not asking in the first place, then we don't have that information. And this is really just naming that. The last two: forbidding use of the municipality's resources for detecting or apprehending individuals based on their citizenship status. This is super important because as of right now, if ICE were to come and to detain someone and they wanted to hold them in the Birdsall-Fagan police facility, they'd be able to do so. This language would prohibit them from being able to do so. And then number 6, the last one, is mandating that municipal services are available to all regardless of immigrant status. Again, we already do that. It's just naming that. So some of this is reflecting what we already do. Some of it is putting a fine point on decisions we've made in the past. And I think that's why it's important to build off of the Westchester language. I think is fine in order to really just have everything be super clear.
Does everybody get that? Agree with it, disagree with it?
I mean, we could just cut those things that are county-wide and bigger than us, it's probably, just part of it that we.
Yeah.
May
that
I
we
make
would
us
take.
a suggestion? There is on the books now, General Order 3.87. It's important for the board to read that because there are things in there that are not in the county policy, specifically dealing with the ability to detain somebody without a judicial warrant for up to 48 hours under certain very specific circumstances. County does not provide for that. Irvington does, New Paltz does, Ithaca does, other places do. I point that out because if you're not going to do that, if you're just going to essentially take the county and do that, you're essentially taking that away from the police. You're saying, you can't do it. So for example, if the police are made aware that there's probable cause to believe that the person has illegally entered, which is what we now have in our code or in the rule and regulation, that person can be detained for up to 48 hours. Irvington goes beyond that. They say they have to entered illegally and have committed a violent crime, which is also what you see in some other places. Definition of violent crime differs. The county calls it just any felony. The city of New York and Irvington have a list of basically 30 different types of crimes. But again, the question this board has to decide is that something that you want OPD to be able to do? They now have that in their general order. It's part of their general order. It's not part of the county's general order for their police, nor is it in the county local law. So I just point that out, that there are not necessarily subtle differences between what the county has and what the police have under 387, as well as under 2021-01, which is the emergency order. So again, when it's looked at, it's a lot of different moving parts to try to merge together.
Okay. Anything else? I'm not sure that that's something we're gonna have to discuss. I mean, that's one.
Yeah, we're gonna have to take it and look at it and pull it apart.
Okay.
No, I think that
Okay. So I need 2 people to look at this and delete and copy paste with the chief and Stuart and look, you could do it on on a regular Word document and just work collaboratively.
Sure.
Delete and all that. Do you want
I
to
can
do it?
work. I can work.
Okay, do you, Mrs. Ryder, do you want to do it? Pat, do you want to do it? It's, you can
I
have
don't
more than
have to
2
do
people.
it. It
huh?
doesn't.
Well, you're a writer. It's nice. Do you want to do it? You can have 2 people. I don't care. Okay. I know I can't do it this week and I'd like to do it this week, so, I'm not really available for it this week, but, and I think most of you know my points anyway.
I mean, I can work with it.
Okay, and then I'll work with you, chief. You will-
Because at the end of the day, even if it's a board resolution, there has to be a general order,
Yes,
but there's a particular way to write a general order that is not writing a resolution.
Right.
So that's important.
we're gonna do the resolution, I think, first, it sounds like.
Well, in essence, what the county did was they passed a local law and they then said probation, correction, public safety, you develop your regulation off of the local law, so they could develop it off of what you come back with. Until that, we have what's on the books now.
But in our case, we're also the police commissioners, and as the chief said, it's a singular police department. We don't need to give it to commissioners. They have commissioners who are in charge of these very large, significant areas. So I'm not sure we need to go through 3 steps to do this.
No, but the role of the
Resolution, and
police
then-
commissioner is not to draft the rules and regs for the police department.
But I do believe that we have oversight, and the resolution should drive. We can't have a resolution
Correct.
and then have the police department have different rules in place on how to carry.
No,
things
which
out.
is why the ultimate resolution you have to decide. And that's why I
Right.
brought out there are differences throughout, as I said in my memo to you folks.
And I think the chief has said it over and over again. We're already doing like 95%, 99%, almost all of this as it is. And it's
Yeah.
better than most of the, and by the way, Irvington just was first out the gate. Nowhere in my conversation I say what they did is really great or bad. It's theirs. It's just a sample that was sent to us, as were other samples. So, well, you guys will work on together. The chief will have his input with the thought, and that was brought up, that you have to have a resolution and then you have to have policy. They're not actually exactly the same thing. There's gonna have to be these 2 pieces that go in, and that is what's different from what we had in the past. Is a much clearer and codified way of approaching it. And I'm just gonna say it again, if the law changes, we change with it. We do not create immigration law. And if there are emergency mandates that have to be followed by the police departments that come from a higher level of government that supersedes us legally, that's exactly what's gonna happen. So just, that's the statement. This is the way reality works. And I think people understand that.
For example, in Congress right now is the Lake and Riley Act. If that is approved, that would change who could be detained, because in that circumstance, it's not conviction, it's an arrest for robbery, shoplifting, or any of those crimes. So that changes. It's not law yet, but it has already passed the House of Representatives.
We hear that. And I've sat in, it's like the conversation about the road diet. You can go from mayor to mayor says this is just too much, and we might finish this on Tuesday, and on Wednesday, everything changes again. I'm okay with that. I don't really feel like waiting. There are just too many people who are very nervous. I don't blame them. I think they have a right to be nervous. This is not an unprecedented issue. It's been done before. We in this village have seen it in action. So it's not an aberration from something. We know that things are going to change, and they might change multiple times in 2025, and we're going to change with it. The board may actually say, let's wait. There are mayors, I know at least one that said, I'm waiting to see what happens in the next 6 months, and that's when we're going to do something. Okay, another strategy, that's fair. I'm sorry. Yeah, local law, that's exactly what I said. Okay, that's a strategy too. That's fine if that's what you want to do. I'm not getting that sense that that's what's the right thing here. And I think that's sort of one of our roles, is to get a sense from the community what's right for here. Okay, so I think we have a plan of action. If we could get this done by Wednesday for Ledge, that's fine. If not, we'll do it. After that, we can always call a special, a special meeting at a business session. We're good. I want to make sure everybody's good with this, because it requires work, it requires thought, etc. Okay, anything else? Did we leave something off? Did we forget something?
No, but I mean, I guess, Pat, if you have any questions or anything, I know, Omar and I are pretty familiar with the way things are moving along and stuff like that. If you have any questions and whatnot, just feel free to reach out and, if you want.
Appreciate that. And I will take advantage of that.
All right, next.
Our last agenda item is, I just want to update the board that next week we will have a resolution for me to sign the cybersecurity and IT as advisory service agreements. These are two, one is our contract with Tom DeMail of O'Connor Davies, who has been our cybersecurity consultant. It's basically a rollover contract in terms of scope with a 3% increase. Last year, the total contract was, I'm sorry, the monthly fee was $4,950. This year it goes up to $5,100. He provides excellent service to us, and I sleep much better at night knowing he's involved. The other piece is a contract for a platform. It's a cybersecurity awareness and training platform called KnowB4, and it's enormously helpful in training our staff and people who are involved with the village. 91% of cyber breaks or I'm using the wrong word, breaches are caused by people responding to phishing emails. This has been really helpful. It's caught people, it's retrained people, it's allows us to tell when we're getting a phishing email. So because the risks of cybersecurity are just, always there and growing and changing every day, these are necessary. The cost for the KnowB4 is not changed. It's $8,694 a year. Yes, the board will be, the board gets, if anybody on a village or town email, maybe getting messages from people that hopefully they'll be able to recognize, and there is training that goes along with it, as well as ransomware blocks and things like that too. So it's a really great platform for us, and we've.
I know once in a while you test us, once in a
Yes.
while.
Oh yeah,
Once in a while.
you're
we get
tested,
a-
and we know passes.
know.
We know who passes and who doesn't. So, but it's been invaluable to us. So.
Comments or questions?
The question is there a component of the training that includes text phishing? Text related phishing? Or is it just email related?
So far it's been just email related. It's possible that they'll be incorporating that, so I'll double check. Because I know that texting and other things, and even just, getting things like that. Because we don't do any business over text, usually we're not doing business, or we won't issue a check to somebody over text. But I think it's a really good, there's a lot of ways we can get caught up. So I will ask, my guess is that they're an ever evolving training platform.
Yeah, I just like, I got one today. For that, pretended to be, from Chase specifically, which is my bank, and,
Yeah, I've gotten those
and
too.
so, but
And they're very convincing.
if you click on the link on your phone, they take over control. No, that was not my village phone, it was my personal phone, but for people who have had village phone numbers for a while that are out in the public, it would totally be foreseeable that someone sends a link to take over control of a village phone, which also has email, and then you're right in.
Yep. So we will look into that, but again, these aren't static trainings. They do respond to the threats that are out there. So, and that's it for tonight, folks.
Okay, thank you. We're gonna adjourn to, we need a motion to adjourn exec session. Can you text her? Okay. I have a motion. All right, ladies, did you want to say something, Stu?
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. 10:25. This concludes our first business meeting of 2025. Enjoy the 3-day weekend for those of you that get to enjoy it. And we will see you, I hope, next Wednesday.